Folks, tonight we've got a tremendous guest for you because of all of the things that we talk about, whether it be preparations for gold, for silver, for food and water and for shelter, moving money around, doing this, doing a number of things. What's the most important thing aside from your spirituality, aside from your spiritual guidance? It's your health, isn't it? Well, what's really, what determines your health? Of course, genes, genetics, to an extent. But how about the stuff you put in your mouth, you eat? How about that donut you had for breakfast this morning? How about that ham sandwich you had for lunch? You see, as we enter this period of uncertainty, these perilous times that we talk about all of the time, we talk about preparation. But, you know, I got an email the other day, and somebody said, you talk about all these problems, but very, very few times do you offer solutions, or when you do, it's limited in scope. And that got me thinking. And I'm right now I'm dealing with a family crisis. I'm dealing with my wife's mother who's, well, quite frankly, she's dying. And I'm looking at friends who are in ill health. I'm looking at people who want to fight the battle that's ahead, that want to be upright when they fight, yet they seem to be overweight. They tire easy. They've got no energy. They're ill. And I look around, I'm thinking, well, how can we put up a good fight if we ourselves are not fit, if we don't take our own advice? And of course, we're over-medicated, we're over-sugared, we're over-amped, we're overfed, perhaps, or ill-fed. So what I had done, and I caught this gentleman on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. His name is Dr. Ted Brower. He's an internationally recognized health and nutrition expert with just an extensive graduate and postgraduate studies in nutrition, biochemistry. He's a very prolific author. He's the author of a couple of books, Maximum Fat Loss, Maximum Solutions for ADD, Learning Disabilities and Autism, and so on. Folks, on HomelandSecurityUS.com, that's our home base. On the right-hand side, there's links to his websites. He's got 2 websites, multiple books, but 2 websites, bodybyted.com and healthmasters.com. We're going to be bringing him on in a few minutes, but for new listeners, and I've heard from so many over the weekend, it's incredible. We're growing at just an alarming rate. And I just want to welcome everyone. Our home base, of course, is HomelandSecurityUS.com. And we broadcast live every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time, right here via the Internet. Also, we're simulcast on the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There you can catch us at the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.com. Before we get to our guest, I just want to say, Joe, welcome to the studio as you rolled in here.
Great to be here. And I didn't know if when you were talking about the ham sandwiches and the foods, if you were reading off the menu I had for breakfast and lunch today. But
no, you know, it's something. I mean, we do talk about preps. We do talk about the need. Look, we need to be healthy. And you know what? Even if you don't care about yourself, and I find that hard to believe, certainly you care about your children. You care about your family members. You care about your wife. You care about your loved ones. So tonight we're going to be very proactive. And Dr. Brower is perhaps as far as I'm concerned, after listening to him on Coast to Coast, I got to tell you, folks, buckle up and make sure your seat backs and tray tables are in their full upright and locked position, because you're going to hear some things tonight that you will not, I mean, you'll never forget. You're going to want to pass this show along to your neighbors, your friends. And the other thing, too, our guest has some certain specials here for our listeners tonight. So please, folks, have a pen and paper handy. Pay very close attention. And with that, I just want to welcome very special guest, Dr. Ted Brower. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Is that the best way to pronounce it?
That's perfect, Doug, and it's good to be on with this evening with you and Joe. I've been big fans of you two for many, many years.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And love your broadcast.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you what. I was just blown away by your depth of knowledge and your folks at YouTube. You can watch various films of Dr. Brower on YouTube, and why women, for example, eat ham, and it goes right to. You had me cracking up, man. I can't even tell that story. I'm cracking up.
I can tell. That's a funny one.
Oh my goodness, yes. But
let me tell you my story real quick, if you don't mind.
Go ahead. Sure.
I was on the seminar circuits with President Bush and Barbara Bush and Colin Powell and General Schwarzkopf and Larry King, Bill Cosby, Margaret Thatcher, Benjamin Netanyahu. I know all these people, have pictures taken with most of them. And what was interesting about all of this, I was on the circuit back in the 90s, and then I had enough of it. I was gone all the time. I was living out of a suitcase, and I went galt. Just done. Good old back to Ayn Rand's book, went galt. And I'd had enough of it. I basically just went on the back burner and just chilled out for a while. And then I started getting more and more involved after 9/11 because I started seeing what was happening and all the lies that we were being told. And finally last year I told my wife, I said, you know what? I've had enough. I'm going to get back active again. And she goes, well, why do you want to do that? And I said, well, be honest with you. I said, somebody needs to be out there telling the truth about what's going on, and we need to be out there promoting what's going on. We need to be promoting people like Hagmann and Hagmann and Alex Jones and George Norrie, and we just need to be letting people know that these people aren't fringe communicators and fringe journalists anymore. These people are telling the truth, and the mainstream media has become completely insignificant. And so what we did is we put together a program called Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy many years ago, and I've written many, many books. And then we put together our list of the top 10 foods never to eat. I want to start with that tonight. I want to tell everybody who's listening how to lower blood pressure, cholesterol, triglycerides, blood sugar levels, how to feel great and have tremendous energy. If you're taking Viagra or Cialis or impotency, I'm going to tell you how to correct all those impotency problems without the use of drugs that make you go blind and deaf. And so we got a lot of stuff we're going to cover tonight. We're talking about women. We're going to talk about burning body fat. We're going to go into detail because here's the reality. If you're 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds overweight and you're unbelievably sick and you can barely stand in an upright position, we've got some rough times coming in this country ahead of us. I believe that with all of my heart because I know what the government is doing in their preparation with their over 1 billion rounds of ammunition and all the things that they're doing. How in the world are you going to defend you and your family if you can't get out of your lazy boy chair for more than 5 minutes without losing your breath? And so everybody listen to me. We're going to cover how to increase your energy levels, how to get maximum output from your body. I'm 58 years old. I feel absolutely wonderful. I work out 6 days a week. My wife's 57 years old. There you can go to our website and you can just take a look at us. You can look at we have another website too, by the way, Doug. It's 10foods.com. You got to type that into your browser top, www.10foods. That's tenfoods.com, and you'll see my wife and myself, and you'll see a bunch of pictures with me with a bunch of the dignitaries that I just mentioned earlier. But I'm here to tell you, if you think you can go ahead and do whatever you want to do and live any way you want to live and get any kind of results other than what you've already gotten, you're absolutely wrong. And I don't care how much gold you have and how much silver you've stored, how much food you've stored. You've got to be in shape. You've got to be ready to go, and you've got to be healthy. And that's what we're going to talk about tonight is how to get in shape and feel good and have maximum output, maximum energy all the days of your life. The number one food we tell people never to eat are the high-fat luncheon meats. I include bacon, sausage, ham, pepperoni in that category. You know, Doug, a few years ago, the University of Southern California, they did a study, and they found that children who eat just 3 hot dogs a week have 9 times the risk of leukemia versus children who do not. Isn't that amazing?
That's fascinating. I mean,
now think about food. That's right. Think about this for a second. The leading cause of death in our children, age 14 and under in this country, other than accidents, is cancer, and the leading type of cancer is leukemia. And 3 hot dogs a week increases the risks of leukemia by 9-fold. I mean, that's nuts. But how many people feed their kids hot dogs and they think it's okay? How many parents give their children the 60 immunizations that are required without trying to find a way through a religious exemption waiver not to have to do all of that? And the kids stay sick all the time, and they come down with autism, they come down with ADD, they come down with learning disabilities. I've read an entire book on that that's out of print now, and we linked all those types of behaviors like the autism and the learning disabilities, and we linked it all to basically all the foods that these kids are eating and all the chemicals that are going into their diet. And so we've got a lot of information to cover tonight. The first thing on that list, though, are the high-fat luncheon meats. I, again, include bacon, sausage, ham, pepperoni, and hot dogs in that category, and we need to avoid those at all costs. And remember, you know, the Bible even tells us not to eat pork, tells us not to eat shellfish, and that wasn't something God was doing to punish us. He wasn't saying, I'm going to hang a ham sandwich, over your head so you can't have it and torture you with it. He said, don't eat it. He knew they were scavenger feeders. And he knew basically they were unbelievably toxic for human beings, and he knew that we weren't supposed to eat it. In fact, what you were talking about with the ham and the women and all that kind of stuff, that's from the Biological Therapy, Volume 1, Number 2, 1983, by Professor Hans Reckwig, and it's called The Adverse Influence of Pork Consumption on Health. And you can listen to the tape of this. You can repeat that to yourself, and you can go ahead and pull that whole article up online. It'll tell you of all the diseases that are transmitted from pigs into humans, and human beings should never eat pigs, and that's why God told us not to do it. That's number 1 on our top 10 list.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. And folks, please pay attention and grab a notebook and pen, because you're going to want to take notes on this. And I got to tell you, we've got to be prepared. We've got to be healthy. We owe it to ourselves. We owe it to our children. Doctor, go ahead and fire away. Keep going.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Number 2 on the list. Number 2 to stay away from on the list are NutraSweet aspartame equal diet soda products. Links in products. These products cause brain tumors, brain cancer, seizures, headaches, optic nerve degradation. The list goes on and on and on and on. It gets so bad with aspartame that in one study, every single primate that was tested developed grand mal epileptic seizures. It eats holes in the brains of the laboratory animals in which it's tested. The aspartic acid component actually eats holes in brain tissue of mammals, including human beings. I mean, this product is so bad it should never have been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. It basically went through one of the backdoor programs of the Food and Drug Administration. It should never have been put in because of the Delaney Amendment. It was shown to cause brain tumors and brain cancer, but yet people still drink diet sodas. Pastors get in the pulpit and promote diet sodas, in churches, which is insane. With some of that, we can talk about that a little bit later on. And it's incredible what's going on as far as how bad these products are and what they're doing to the population of this country, and the massive increase we've had in brain cancer from these products. And it's in thousands of products now, and it should never be used. And don't use the other stuff. Don't use the Splenda either. That causes calcification of the kidneys. So if you want to use an artificial sweetener, you got 3 colors to choose from. You got the pink, the yellow, and the blue. Stay in the pink. That's okay in moderation with sufficient quantities of water, but you're better to use stevia. It's a natural sweetener that actually doesn't have any side effects besides it tastes really good. It tastes great in lemonade, but that's the best one to use is going to be the stevia. That's one of the best products to use. Number 3 to stay away from are margarine products, trans fats, hydrogenated oils. If you don't know what trans fats are, you must be living in a cave for the past 10 years. I don't know what to say. I mean, these are hydrogenated oils. They're unbelievably poisonous. They're unbelievably toxic. They massively increase the risk of breast cancer in women. They increase the risks of infertility in men. They increase the risks of heart disease through the roof. It's ridiculous, and basically you're better off with real organic butter. Now, if you're going to buy anything organic, buy the butter organic, because the milk fats actually contain a lot of the different hormones and chemicals that are pumped into the cows, and you really need to get organic butter if you're going to use it. But you're better off to mix the butter with 50-50 cold-pressed virgin olive oil, and that makes a delicious soft spread, which is actually pretty healthy for you. And, of course, olive oil is better than butter if you're going to be using it as a dip. It really is a lot better. And number 4 to stay away from is shellfish. That includes lobster, shrimp, oyster, prawns, scallops, crabs, and clams. Remember, a lobster is an arthropod. A cockroach is an arthropod. All a lobster is a giant cockroach. I mean, that's about easy enough to say. And what folks need to realize is this. I mean, we have to understand what happened in the Gulf of Mexico a couple of years ago with that core exit they dumped in there by the millions and millions of gallons. That stuff is unbelievably poisonous. It has destroyed a lot of the fisheries in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's causing a lot of mutations in the shellfish in the Gulf of Mexico. We don't need to be eating shellfish at all. And again, that's another biblically forbidden food. It does not have fins and scales. It is a shellfish, and also skinfish are forbidden. You need to avoid these types of fish, and they contain abnormally, in some cases, they can contain abnormally high levels of arsenic, lead, and mercury. And so you've got to avoid shellfish to the best of your ability, grouper, red snapper, orange roughy, all of that if you know the source, and stay away from farm-raised fish, especially salmon, because they get really infected with a lot of parasites, and they've got to give them a lot of antibiotics. In addition to that, farm-raised salmon usually aren't pink. They have to dye them to make them look pink, and so they're just an unhealthy fish to eat, and you need to avoid them. Number 5 to stay away from it. Yeah, well, that's just I'm sorry. If I'm giving you information that's too fast, I can slow down a little bit. Number 5 to stay away from is basically the junk food category, Twinkies and Ding Dongs and cupcakes. You know, it's interesting. Years ago, back in the 60s, the inventor of the ADHD disease, the diagnosis back in 1968, his name was Dr. Leon Eisenberg, And what's interesting about Dr. Eisenberg, he actually revealed the truth about ADHD and ADD in the February 2012 edition of Der Spiegel magazine in Germany. Okay? And he was interviewed on his deathbed. He was dying. And he said that basically he made up the disease in 1968, that ADHD did not exist, that he made it up, and basically took credit for it. And now after all of these years, he realized what he had done as far as putting all these children on all of these drugs, and he regretted what he had done, so he was coming clean on his deathbed confession that it was a made-up disease. Now, what's interesting about this, and I find this really fascinating, Doug, is that ADHD and ADD have almost become a problem that we have just that's gone out of control because of the immunizations, because of the measles vaccine, because of the blue dyes, the red dyes, the yellow dyes, and all of the food, all the chemicals that we're doing, all the GMOs. We're going to talk about all of this stuff tonight. The GMOs, the Roundup, which is the glyphosate. Glyphosate is one of the most toxic substances on the planet. It's been linked to celiac disease. It's also been linked to all the problems we've had with gluten sensitivity and people getting off all the gluten products because of the use of Roundup on all these crops. And now we have children, because of all the immunizations and all these different conditions, they're being routinely diagnosed with ADD and ADHD to the tune of about 20 million of them in the United States, if you get accurate numbers on it. And the drug of choice is either Ritalin or Adderall. These are Schedule II drugs in the same category with morphine, opium, Percodan, and Demerol. I've seen children come in my office as young as the age of 2 that have been diagnosed with ADD and ADHD who have been given Ritalin at the age of 2. It massively impairs brain development. And the craziest thing, if your child went to the doctor and he wasn't feeling well at the age of 2, and the doctor goes, I know what we can do. We can go ahead and throw on some morphine for a while, see how that works out for him. You'd say, what are you, nuts, doc? Here's the thing. Morphine and Ritalin are in the same category. Ritalin basically is methylphenidate. The drugs that are so prevalent on the street today are called methamphetamines, and I personally believe, and I believe the documentation is there to produce statistical evidence to this, that the reason we've had such a huge increase in meth production in these laboratories around the country is so many people, millions and millions and millions of people have gotten addicted to Ritalin and to Adderall all the way through high school, and when they're 18 years old, they're suddenly taken off of it, and they look for alternative sources. So instead of getting methylphenidate, they get methamphetamines, and it gives them the same buzz. If a cocaine addict is given Ritalin, he cannot tell whether he was given Ritalin or cocaine. It's one of the top 10 drugs slated for pharmaceutical theft. Adults and children both grind it up and snort it up their noses and get the same high they get from cocaine. This is nuts, Doug, that we're giving this to all these children, and it's absolutely crazy that we're doing it. That's why number 5 category in these top 10 foods never to eat is a junk food category. And that's including all these chemicals, all the blue dyes, the red dyes, all the sugar, all the garbage that we feed the kids, and we feed ourselves the Twinkies, the Ding Dongs, and the cupcakes. And we've had so many people come into the office and they wanted to lower their blood pressure, their cholesterol, and we tell them, we say, look, you can feel good and you can look good, but you can't keep doing what you've done to get to where you are and get any different results. If you're going down the interstate and you want to go east, but you're going west, you've got to take the next exit ramp and you've got to go the other direction. You can't keep doing what you've done to feel absolutely awful and hope for any different response from your body. And that's what people have to understand. We've got to stay healthy. We have to be able to stay strong, because if we die, what good is the fight? The fight's over for us, and we have to realize that we've got to stay strong. We've got to stay healthy. We've got some folks standing by at the office. If you don't mind if I give out a phone number, Doug. I know a lot of folks don't have access to the Internet, or they don't have the ability to call during the day. They give us our office a call at 1-800-726-1834, 1-800-726 1834. We have a brand new book out. It's called Breakthrough Health, and it talks about what the globalists are doing to us. It talks about what the American Medical Association is doing to us. It talks about what the Rockefeller Trust is doing to us as far as getting rid of the natural medical care to push us all into a drug culture. It's called Breakthrough Health. It's doing real well as far as the sales numbers on it, and it'll bless you and your family if you read it. Plus, it has 45 chapters in it that goes into detail on all the things that we're talking about tonight. And again, that's 10foods.com. 10foods. You have to spell it out. www.10foods.com. And you can also go to healthmasters.com if you want to do that. And again, the number is 1-800-726-1834. Now, also remember this: we have all of these kids that have been diagnosed with all of these diseases, like ADD and put on Ritalin and all that. Back in the 90s, I did a big research study on that. It was my first book that was called, one of my first books, it was called Maximum Solutions to ADD, Autism, and Learning Disabilities in Children. And, Doug, what we found is that almost every single incident, like at Columbine and all these other cases, when these children's medical records were looked at after they were killed, they found out they were either on Ritalin or Adderall or Prozac or a combination of these tricyclic antidepressant cocktails, which made them basically want to kill themselves and kill other people, and so the craziest thing is these children acted all of this stuff out with these drugs. And this is something we have to understand. These are not M&Ms we're giving these children. This is methylphenidate, Schedule 2, same category with morphine. There's all kinds of natural things that you can do with a child that's been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD without the use of drugs. And we talk about that on that same website. It's called the Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy program. Number 6 is soy. Now, I want to really kind of cover this one in depth, Doug. This is really important. Everybody listen to me for a second. Soy shouldn't even be listed as a food. Soy should be listed as a hormone. Soy is one of the worst products that you can put into your body. It is what's called an endocrine disruptor. It messes up the endocrine and the glandular system in the body. Let me give you an example. Back in the fall of 1975, I was a junior at Florida State University. If I may mention, they're national champions now in football finally. And it was interesting, Doug, because
congratulations, by the way.
Well, thank you. I was hoping you're going to give me a pro yes on that. You weren't an Auburn fan, but what ended up happening is I was taking a class in embryology, and we started learning some very interesting thing about mammals. And what I found was this: all mammals are born, or are basically, when they're first conceived, are conceived as females. Most people don't realize that. There's no differentiation as far as the cells. And what ends up happening during the gestational cycle, the woman, because of the Y chromosome in the male, this is when we're talking about humans now, the Y chromosome in the male triggers the woman to start releasing testosterone. And the cells that would normally produce the ovaries in the woman drop down and produce the testicles in the male. In addition to that, basically the secondary sex characteristics like the reproductive organs form, etc. If you're in the gestational cycle and you start getting exposed to products like bisphenol A, which is the plastic estrogen mimicker, or you get exposed to soy products and all these different types of estrogen compounds, the female body cannot produce sufficient quantities of testosterone to cause the gestational cycle in the male to produce a child that is developed properly as far as a man. And the little boy who basically is born with a woman's brain and can be born with extremely small genitalia. And it happens all of the time. They want to dress like a woman. They want to walk like a woman. They want to act like a woman. And they've been literally chemically castrated in utero from all of the estrogens that we're putting in the food supply. And that is crazy. And the research on this is so exact and so revealing, but nobody wants to talk about it. And what we have to understand is when you're pregnant, you shouldn't be taking flu shots, you shouldn't be taking immunizations, and you shouldn't be taking female exogenous estrogens into your system, either by injections or by food, including soy and all of the things that need to stay away from, all plastic and all pesticides, which are almost all estrogen mimickers. So it's very, very important that everybody understands that who's pregnant or going to have children, and make sure the child never goes on soy protein. The encephalograms, the brain encephalograms, a little baby girl's brain chemistry encephalogram is different than a little baby boy's encephalogram. If a little baby boy who is born normal with a little boy's brain is given soy formula within 2 to 3 weeks, that brain encephalogram changes from that of a little boy to that of a little girl. And Doug, as far as I know, I've never seen any way to reverse it back to that of a little boy.
Wow.
And so we have to. So this is how this. But remember now, the globalists that have done this to us. Okay, the chemical petro industry, they knew this was going to happen back in the 40s and the 50s when they put the plastics into the food supply. They knew it was going to happen when they started promoting soy protein for children. I mean, they're a chemist just like I am. They know what happens when you put exogenous estrogens into a mammal. They know what happens, and they know what it does to the reproductive cycle and what it does to the children and what it does to the children in utero. It knows it. They know that high amounts of estrogen will chemically castrate a boy that's in utero. And the problem is, nobody wants to talk about it, nobody wants to deal with it, and everybody wants to pretend like it's not happening. And that's what's going on with all of that. Now, that's number 5 to say.
Okay. At some point during this conversation, Doctor, I want to know number one. I want to know why, and we don't have to address that now. But just for your future reference here, I want to know why. And really, when we talk too about the effects of foods, especially that cause Alzheimer's, dementia, whatever, I want to know why, and the who, because I've got a real problem with the who behind this, and I'm making a list. Okay.
Well, here's the deal. Okay, well, let me share something with you real quickly. My mom was born in Germany in 1916. Okay, my first language was German. Ich kann Deutsch sprechen. I speak fluent German. Okay. My mom was born in 1916. My father was born in Iowa back in 1901. My dad went back to Germany. His parents were both German after the war. In 1952, he met my mom. They fell in love. They got married. They came to the United States. I was born in 1955. I'm 58 years old now. Now, here's what's interesting about this. My mom lived to be in her 90s. And back in 2001, she was in the nursing home, but she was still very mentally acute. She'd just gone in the year before. They hadn't yet destroyed her brain with all the drugs that they had put her on. And what was interesting, when the 9/11 happened and the trade towers fell, she started crying. And I was in her hotel room. I'm at her hotel. God, it wasn't a hotel. It was a nightmare is what it was. I was at her nursing home. And basically I was sitting there and I was talking to her. And she was just crying and she was sobbing. And she said in German, she said, Ich habe das schon alle gesehen. Now what that means in German is, I've already seen all of this. And I looked at her and I said, Mom, what are you talking about? She goes, Ted, this is the Reichstag fire in 1933. She goes, I know what comes next. Next is the Enabling Act, which is our Patriot Act. And she knew it, and she called it out, Doug, before it ever happened. And she goes, I know what happens next. Next it goes to tyranny. Next it goes to dictatorships. Next it goes to gun confiscation. She goes, I've already seen it. She looked at me. She just crying. She goes, I am so glad that I'm old, and I'm not going to have to live to see this again. And I thought, Mom, come on. Really, because I wasn't awake then. In 2001, I wasn't awake yet. Okay, I knew about the banking system, and I knew about the Federal Reserve, how corrupt that was, but I did not realize how the globalists had taken control of our government and basically were doing all of these things. I wasn't aware of that. I was not awake 13 years ago when this all happened with my mom, but she was awake. And she told me, she said, Ted, let me tell you what happened in Germany. She said, the German people, we never elected Hitler as president. She goes, it never happened. She goes, when he ran for president in the early 30s, he didn't make it. He didn't become president. He didn't do that. He didn't. But what happened is the Nazi Party got control of the Congress in Germany, and they appointed him chancellor. And once they appointed him chancellor, they had the Reichstag fire. And then when the Reichstag fire happened, basically they appointed him Führer because he started arresting communists and just went nuts. And she goes, we didn't see it coming. We didn't realize what was happening. She goes, we were stupid. And then we started believing Goebbels, who was the propaganda minister. And we started believing everything that Goebbels said on the radio, in the newspapers. We started believing everything he said because we thought, there's no way they would lie to us. There's no way the government would lie to us. These are good people. They've helped Germany get out of the terrible the fiasco of the Great Depression. They've actually been able to, everybody forgets, Hitler was a rock star. And guys, I don't care what you say about Hitler, before he went nuts, he was a rock star, and he ended up he was idolized in Germany. He was Time Magazine Man of the Year, and then he went basically nuts and wanted to conquer the whole world. And my mom and everybody in Germany looked at him as like the great savior that had taken them out of this, and they believed that he could do no wrong. And they got sucked in. And she told me, she goes, Ted, she goes, here's what happened. We believed the lie. We believed Goebbels. We believed he was good. That's why we idolized him like we did. She goes, the problem is, we're awake now. Germany was turned into rubble, and she goes, 3/4 of our relatives all died. She goes, if your dad hadn't been in the United States, had he not been born in the United States, you wouldn't even be here. He'd been killed too, along with all the other relatives. She goes, it's unbelievable what's happened to Germany and how it was destroyed from this war. And I said to her, I said, Mom, that's crazy. She goes, the problem is, Ted, the American people believe the lie. They believe Goebbels. They believe the propaganda that comes out of the White House. They're doing the exact same thing that we did in Nazi Germany when we saw our rights being slowly eroded, but it wasn't that big of a deal because it was very, very slow, like an IV, like a drip IV, and we didn't realize what was happening to us. They were slowly anesthetizing us until it was too late, until all of a sudden now we're invading Poland, and now World War II has started. And she goes, and that's exactly what's going on in the United States. And, it's funny to me, Doug, when we go back and we look at what's happened in the United States, and we look what happened in Germany, and the parallels, there's that really good book that Jim Marrs wrote, The Fourth Reich, and in which he basically talks about the parallels of the United States and Nazi Germany. And the craziest thing is the American people don't want to wake up. They don't want to see the truth. They don't want to realize the truth, and they don't want to realize how incredibly corrupt our Congress and our administration is in Washington, D.C., and also in most of the state governments. I mean, our government's been taken over by a bunch of feral cats up in Washington, and they need to be captured and taken out of Washington and relocated. We don't need to keep them in power up there. And the problem is now and the problem is with the Diebold election machines, and the electronic voting, we don't even know if we're actually getting our votes counted anymore. And in some cases, we've seen, like with all the stuff that's happened up in Ohio this past election, it's probably not being counted properly. And so this United States is in a mess. We need to wake up, and we need to realize that tyranny has enveloped us, and if we don't change what we're doing, if we don't wake up, if we don't stop doing what we've done, we're going to fall. Years ago, my dad and I were talking before he died. He died back in 1984, and he was like 81 years old, 82 years old, something like that. And I'll never forget, he told me, he goes, son, let me tell you what's happened to the United States today. He goes, well, I said, what's that, Dad? He said, we're following the same thing as the Roman Empire did. And I said, well, what do you mean, Dad? I don't understand. He goes, the reason the Roman Empire fell is that they stopped raising little Romans. We've stopped raising little Americans. We've lost the vision of what we are as a nation, as a country. We've lost the vision of the Constitution. We've been taken over by the banks. We've been taken over by the Federal Reserve System. He goes, we've lost it. And he says, gradually, all of our freedoms are going to be taken away with it. And he goes, the people don't see what's happening. And I remember he told me that about 3 months before he died, Doug. And I thought back then I was, I was in my 20s. I thought, come on, Dad, you got to be, you got to be losing it or something. He was right. He was 100% right. And so I started looking at all these foods, as a nutritionist, and I started looking at all the foods that we're doing as a biochemist, and I started saying, hey, wait a minute, why do we have chemicals in our food that are chemically castrating children in utero? Why do we have chemicals in our food like fluoride, which is the next thing on the list, which has been shown to massively drop your IQ points if you're a child, according to Harvard? Why are they putting it in our toothpaste? Why was it used as a drug in the concentration camps by IG Farben? And now all of a sudden, we get all the documents out of IG Farben in 1945, and suddenly we start putting it in our water supply in the United States. It completely calcifies the pineal gland with much exposure to it, which gives us our third sight, our insight. And we have no ability to have any reasoning skills. And so why are all these drugs being thrust upon us when we know that fluoride is rat poison? Why are we being forced to drink it? Why are we being drugged by the municipalities, by our local and state governments and the federal governments with this fluoride nonsense and being forced to drink poison? Why are we having that happen to us and not raising up an uproar about it? I mean, the whole thing is nuts. But number 6 on our top 10, and forgive me for digressing like that, but I want to tell you a bit more about my background and why I feel so passionate about this. Number 6 is fluoride in the water supply. I also include chlorine in that category. I'm sorry, number 6 was soy. Number 7 is chlorine and fluoride. You've got to stay away from chlorine. You've got to stay away from fluoride. These are halogens. If you look at the periodic table of elements, you've got the chlorine, you've got the bromide, you've got the fluoride, you've got the iodine, and those three, the bromides and the fluorides and the chlorines, they confuse the thyroid gland into thinking that they're iodine, and they get absorbed into the thyroid gland. They're a massive endocrine disruptor. They cause you a massive increase in weight. They can cause all kinds of problems with brain fogginess and all kinds of other health conditions and all kinds of other diseases associated with the different glandular tissues. And what ends up happening is, Doug, we don't even realize it's happening to us because we're drinking the fluoride, we're drinking the chlorine, we're not getting sufficient quantities of iodine because they use the bromide, which replaces iodine in the bread products, and we're getting all these health conditions. If a man takes iodine on a regular basis, at least 13 milligrams a day, he ends up having virtual zero risk of prostate cancer. Women have almost virtual zero risk of breast cancer, but nobody takes an iodine supplement. Nobody does it. I do. And we have them at healthmasters.com, but the point is nobody understands how important supplementation is because the food has been so altered and so messed up, and nobody understands how important it is. You've got to have a filtration system in your home that will take chlorine and fluoride out of the water. You can use reverse osmosis. You can use steam distillation. We use the steam distillation. We have that at the Health Masters website, but the point is you've got to do something like that because if you don't, you're going to be putting all of these poisons into your body, and these poisons are going to wreak havoc on your endocrine system and on your thyroid gland, and you've got to avoid those. Number 8 are high-fat dairy products. You've got to stay away from all of these dairy products that contain bovine growth hormone, all these chemicals. Again, if you're going to drink dairy, get grass-fed dairy and try to get it that's without any hormones in it. Try to get it organic. That's very, very important. Number 9 are coffee products. If you're going to drink caffeine, I use something called a purple stick. I haven't had any of those tonight, but I usually have them in the morning when I get out of bed before I work out. And it's a green tea extract, and that's an excellent product as far as because it has B vitamins and everything else in it. And again, it doesn't elevate cortisol. Coffee will elevate cortisol. Cortisol is a stress hormone. It will make you store body fat. It can also elevate your blood pressure. You need to avoid coffee as much as possible. You can drink it in moderation. If you're going to drink it, get a good source of coffee, but don't do it every single day because it's very, very addictive. It can elevate the blood pressure, and it will increase your cortisol levels. And number 10, Doug, to stay away from are alcohol products. And I've never heard anyone say, my life was a wreck, and then I started drinking, and everything got great. I mean, but I've seen so many people ruin their lives through alcohol, and I'm not talking about an occasional glass of beer or occasional glass of wine. I don't care about that. But what I'm talking is the habitual daily use of alcohol, even in moderation. It shouldn't be done. About 10% of the population basically is predisposed genetically to become alcoholics. In addition to that, just 1 ounce of alcohol will decrease the body's production of lipase by almost 35%, which helps to burn body fat instead of storing body fat. And that's why you get these big beer guts. So you really need to avoid alcohol as much as possible. Like I said, occasional glass of beer or wine or whatever, that's okay. But again, if you want to get a copy of the Breakthrough Health book, give us a call at 1-800-726-1834. And we can also talk about the top 5 ways to burn body fat if you'd like to do that too, Doug. We also go into more in GMO foods. We can talk about whatever you want to talk about. It doesn't matter. We can talk about Genesis chapter 6 and the rise of the Nephilim.
Wow. Yeah, I should have Steve on. Folks, healthmasters.com. That's healthmasters.com for our guest website. And wow, you've got a newsletter as well. You've got a free weekly newsletter, and you've got
that's right. If you go to healthmasters.com, you can sign up for the newsletter. So it's free. There's no cost to it. Just go sign up, and you can get that. Now, you won't get the stuff that's in the book because that's all new information. The newsletters, we recycle those, but it's a phenomenal program. Now, the Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy program on the 10foods.com, that's a phenomenal program, too. That's a CD set along with a whole bunch of medical reports and about 3 different books you get with that program. That's a phenomenal book, too. That's a phenomenal program, too.
Okay, fantastic. Well, folks, in case you're joining us late, our very special guest is, Dr. Ted Broer. Oh my goodness! I was talking about coffee. It just went down the wrong pipe there.
Your coffee test time.
Yeah, perhaps that's a sign. Healthmasters.com, talking about our diets, talking about what we should and shouldn't be doing, and the list of the 10 foods or the food items that we should not be consuming. Of course, the processed foods all the way through coffee, alcohol, and such. Somewhat common sense, I suppose. I was a little bit surprised by the effects when I was looking into this, by the effects of coffee. And I can't believe, by the way, you're not under the influence of caffeine, man. You come out of the gate running, which is fabulous.
But thank you. I haven't had any green tea or anything. I did have some chocolate protein that we have. It's some New Zealand chocolate protein that's pretty good, but it has very little caffeine in it. But here's the thing. Let me tell you about coffee real quick. When I was in graduate school at Florida State University, I used to drink 18 cups of coffee a day. And when I was 27 years old, Doug, I came down with heart disease and almost died from it. Interesting story, and one of the reasons that precipitated me to go back to college. And what was interesting is that I didn't realize what I was doing to my body. I just thought I was always able to I was an athlete, so I was able to just push my body as hard as I wanted to, and it would always respond back perfectly. And what ended up happening is when I came down with the heart disease, it really, really got my attention, and I was in bed for 3 months, and I almost died. And so I began to realize very quickly that I couldn't just keep doing that. I had to find a better way of living and a better way of basically taking care of my own body and my own health. And I did, and it basically gave birth to healthmasters.com, and we basically have been doing that ever since. For over 33 years now, we've been basically helping and blessing people all over the United States, all over the world. And so we've learned that there's certain things to eat, certain things not to eat, certain things to do, certain things not to do. And if you don't believe that, then just look at the death statistics. Right now, the United States is pretty much leading the industrialized world when it comes to heart disease, to diabetes, and to cancer. And like we mentioned earlier, the leading cause of death in kids, other than accidents, is cancer, and it's not getting any better. And look at this now. We had 1 in 50 children, 1 in 50 boys now are being diagnosed with autism. And I can't tell you how many times I have spoken to people, and I have pleaded with them when they're pregnant. I mean, friends. I think over and over and over this has happened. And I've said, please, evaluate what you want to do as far as immunizations before the baby is born. Because as soon as that baby is born, if you haven't born in a hospital, the hospital is going to tell you that child has to have a hepatitis shot. Now, the reason they give you the hepatitis shot, because the reason that's been mandated is that they assume that all pregnant women are IV drug users and they all have hepatitis. That's the truth. That's why they do it, Doug. That was why it originally was passed.
Really?
And they don't. That's right. That's correct. And they assume that the woman's got hepatitis and they've got to immunize that child immediately. And that's crazy. My wife is not an IV drug user. We have 4 kids. Not one of our kids got a hepatitis shot. I told them no. I said I don't want a hepatitis shot. And the easiest way to deal with all that when you're in a hospital with the midwife or whoever's delivering the baby, if they want to start doing all these injections, say no. Our attending physician with my child will take care of all the stuff that the child needs. Just leave it at that. Let it go.
All right. Let's go from there. From right there. When a child is born, for example, what immunizations will they tell you, aside from that, are required? Is that the only shot that's required upon birth?
Initially, on the very first day, but then within a few weeks, they want you back at the pediatrician's office. They want to start doing all the different types of injections. Now, I don't have an injection schedule. There's so many of them here in front of me. I can pull one up online if you'd like for me to. But the reality is my children have had no immunizations. None. Zero. Not a mix. And I remember when I said, and what I did is I went to our local county seat, and I told them, I said, I need a religious exemption waiver, because basically the Bible tells us that don't you know that ye yourselves are God's temple, and God's Spirit lives within you, and if you destroy God's temple, He will destroy you. And I never had to use that scripture, but I just told them I had a religious, aversion to immunizations in my children, and they said, not a problem. Back then they had a blue form they would give you, and that would allow you to put the child into school. And then finally, I remember one day the lady was saying to me, after I had for the third or fourth time I came in, and finally the lady said, well, you really, really need to think about this. If there's a measles outbreak, your child will be quarantined. And I said, why would there be a measles outbreak if everybody else has the measles vaccine?
That's a good response.
And I said, and plus I started laughing. I said, I have the measles. I guarantee you did too, Doug. And I said, we're fine.
I did.
Yeah, everybody had the measles back in the 50s. And, we all had measles outbreaks in schools. Everybody got the measles. Everybody was fine. No incident. What was autism? 1 in 100,000, 1 in 200,000 back then? Everybody got the measles. Everybody went home for a couple of days, got to eat some chicken soup, and got back to school within a week. And, and it was so crazy. We were all happy when we got the measles and chicken pox, and got them over with. It wasn't a big deal. And then we had a lifetime immunity to them. And the nonsense about immunizations is they don't give you lifetime immunities to these different types of diseases. And let's take a look at the flu shot, for instance. They all of the multi-shot flu shots all contain thimerosal, which is mercury. Mercury is incredibly toxic to the brain tissue. And I always tell folks, if you want to do a flu shot, if you absolutely have to do a flu shot, though 3 flu shots in the elderly increase the risks of senile dementia by 50%, if you want to pull those switches on the wall and pretend like it's not going to happen to you, go ahead. I said, but the reality is this: if you're going to do a flu shot, make sure you get one that does not contain adjuvants like squalene, and make sure you get one that does not contain thimerosal. And the problem is you won't find them without squalene and thimerosal. And the squalene is an adjuvant that basically accelerates the compound that's in the flu vaccine to make it more irritable to the body, so you have more of an allergic response to it. And what's crazy about it is they cause brain inflammation. And how many people have died from these flu shots now? But everybody says, we don't want to deal with that. We want to make sure everybody gets the flu shot. Get at least 1 or 2 or 3 flu shots a year. Are you kidding me? The drug manufacturers that manufacture the flu shots had to be given immunity against prosecution because of all the people they were killing, Doug. And it's supposed to be okay? It's not okay. I never get the flu shot. I never take stuff like that and put it in my body. How do I even know what's in that needle they're injecting in me? How do I know? I don't know what's in it.
Exactly. And Joe, I think you had a situation the other day where you were in a drugstore. He was in a drugstore, right?
Yeah, about 3 weeks ago, and they had this is a pharmacy that we use a lot if we need to get things filled that's real close to the house. So they had this nurse in there who had a desk set up, and they were trying to give away flu shots for the swine flu. And the person told me I was in the target age group that this virus was targeting, and how I needed to get a flu shot. Well, to make a long story short, I said no. I asked to see the insert. She would not provide me with one. And we kind of went back and forth in front of a bunch of people who were just spectators, just waiting for their medicine. And I didn't get the shot, but my wife referred to her as the shot Nazi after we left, is what it reminded her of.
No, and you know it's crazy. They did the same thing to me one day. I was thinking I was in a Walmart or something, I walked in and they were doing flu shots back in the pharmacy. This is years ago, and maybe the Sam's Club, I don't know. And I remember I walked in and I said, do you mind if I look at the box that the shot came in? They said, sure, here it is. And they handed it to me. And I said, and I looked at it. Before I looked at it, I said, does this product contain thimerosal or mercury? She goes, oh, no. They're all mercury-free. There's no thimerosal. I looked at the shot. One of the first ingredients, it said thimerosal. And I said to her, well, why does it say it has thimerosal in it? She goes, oh, it doesn't say that. God, was it a Jedi mind trick? It doesn't say that? And I looked at her and I said, what do you mean it doesn't say that? And she goes, no, it doesn't say that. I said, I'm looking at it. I'm reading it. She goes, no, it doesn't say thimerosal. And finally I looked at her and I took it to her and I showed it to her. I said, can you read this? She says, oh, no, I can't read that, but it doesn't say thimerosal. And I'm like, oh, gosh, are you kidding me? And I thought to myself, are they that inept? I mean, are they that brainwashed? They're told that it doesn't contain mercury, but it has mercury. You know, when we were kids, we used to play with mercury thermometers. I mean, I never really got involved with a lot of that, but a lot of kids did. Nowadays, if you break a mercury thermometer open, Doug, they call hazmat and they evacuate the entire school. They evacuate the entire school. And when dentists remove mercury fillings and all that kind of stuff, they've got to put it in special containers because they can't be put into landfills. And it's crazy how poisonous mercury is, and yet they continue to put it in our bodies. The same thing with aluminum. I mean, we get exposed to so much exogenous aluminum. And here's the problem with aluminum. And this is the nuttiest thing about aluminum. See, aluminum in nature, about 5 to 7% of the Earth's crust is aluminum, but it's in a form in which it's bonded with other compounds and other elements, and so it's not readily accessible. It's not biologically available. Biologically available atomized aluminum is poisonous to every living thing, including plants and animals on this planet. Nothing can deal with it, okay? It's not found in nature that way. And, it's interesting to me because I was on George Norrie last week. He said to me, well, what do you think about chemtrails? And I'm like, oh, gosh, chemtrails. Chemtrails are interesting because, remember, I'm a research biochemist from Florida State University, okay? I didn't believe in chemtrails. That was the last thing that I said, absolutely no way, the government's not going to do that to us. But then I started thinking, back in the 90s, we had a Mediterranean fruit fly outbreak here in central Florida where there are a lot of orange groves where I live. And I'll never forget, the news came on one night, and they said, the DC-3s will be coming over your town and your city tomorrow, spraying malathion at rooftop level over all the residential areas and over all of the houses and cars in the groves. So make sure that if you're pregnant, don't go outside and get sprayed with the malathion, and make sure you keep your pets and your animals and keep your cars inside because it may damage the paint. And sure enough, the next day, the DC-3s are flying over, and these huge spray tips on their wings spraying malathion, which is a neurotoxin, another xenoestrogen, all over the population in Central Florida. Finally, some consumer groups went up to Tallahassee, filed a lawsuit to stop it, and got the spraying stopped. So I knew that they'd spray us with poison. I'd already been sprayed with malathion. And so what I did, I couldn't believe it. I'd see these planes, and I'd watch the contrails disappear in the sky, and then I'd watch these chemtrails turn into these big cirrus clouds all the way around the skies and block the sunlight. And I thought, no way, they're not doing that to us. Finally, it got so bad a few years ago, I finally went to the lake. I took a Pyrex beaker, and I sterilized it 5 times with distilled water. I made my own distilled water, so I knew exactly how it was manufactured. I took it to the lake. I put it on a stand so it wouldn't get any splatter back into it, and I took a full 2-inch rainwater sample. Then I took that Pyrex beaker, I sealed it, and I put it in my refrigerator, and I said, I don't want to know. This is true. I did this. I said, I don't want to know. And 6 months later, it was Christmas. And they sprayed us so heavily over the house again, it was ridiculous. I saw all these, this time they were right over my, like X marks the spot, right over my house. And I thought, okay, that's it. Next day, it rained again. I took another Pyrex beaker down to the lake, got another rain sample. This time I sent both of the samples in. They were both so high in aluminum and mercury, taken 6 months apart, that the EPA considered them toxic. Not mercury, aluminum and barium. Aluminum and barium. And I thought, this is crazy. I'll be happy to send that report to anybody who's listening tonight. I'll email it to them at no cost, or I'll post it on my website. The point is, I now believe that aluminum and barium is in the air, because I tested my water, my rainwater, which is supposed to be distilled water, and it was loaded with those two chemicals. And those same tests have been done all over the country, and I urge everybody listening tonight to do a rainwater sample and do the same test, because you can do it very easily and send it to a state laboratory and ask them for those. It only costs like $40 to get the test done, and you'll know for sure what you're breathing. But here's the problem with that aluminum. It's atomized, okay? It's tiny, tiny, tiny little particles. And what happens is, it doesn't go through your lungs necessarily, though it will do that. It can go directly into your olfaction glands up by your brain and go directly into the brain that way. That's why it's so dangerous when it's atomized like that. It's free aluminum. It's massively increasing the risks of Alzheimer's disease in the United States. And I don't know what in the world the government is. The only thing it can possibly be is eugenics. That's it. There's no other explanation for this. There's no other reason they would do this with the plastics, with the pesticides, with the barium, with the aluminum, because we know barium wreaks havoc on the immune system, and we know the Alzheimer's disease, one of the primary causes is aluminum. And so what in the world are they doing? I don't know. That one good video out on the internet now, you know, what in the world are they spraying and why in the world are they spraying? I mean, we all need to be aware of this, and we need to be forwarding all of these emails to all of our friends, which I do on an ongoing basis, because the reality is, I'm a biochemist. It doesn't take a biochemist to do a water test. But I know what I did, and I know I did it right. And so now I can't prove that they're spraying us out of these aerosol sprays on these airplanes, because I can't get up at 40,000 feet and take a sample, but I can sure test my water and my rain, and I know that it's in there, Doug. And so I know that basically we've got to make sure that we avoid that as much as we possibly can. And we need to be taking a compound called EDTA, ethylene ditetracetic acid is the abbreviation for it. And what it does, it helps to bind aluminum and pull it back out of the system, and helps to basically help prevent the effects of all of that. So I didn't mean to get off on all of that. But I thought
it's really good to because, well, I got to tell you, one of the issues I had is I look up at the sky. I see the same thing that you see and others see, and I just never, at first, I never gave it a thought. And then when Joe would say, "Oh, it's chemtrails," I never heard of a chemtrail until 10 years ago, 8 years ago. I don't know, and I thought, they can't be doing this. Why would they be doing this? And of course, you're reinforcing now what everyone else has been saying. So the so-called fringe media has been talking about. When it's not so fringe. But my question is, I understand the eugenics aspect of this, but wouldn't the people who are doing the spraying, wouldn't they be subjecting themselves to the same toxins as us?
Not if they take an EDTA injection once a month.
Ah, okay.
Takes it back out of the system. I take an EDTA injection once a month. I don't want it in my brain. I bind it and I pull it back out. See what happened with chelation. You can do it orally. You can do it intravenously. What happened back in the 30s? The Germans had this big war effort going, and they were spraying all of these ships with lead paint. And what ended up happening is a lot of them started coming down with dropping IQ points because of the lead. It's very toxic. So they had to find a way to try to get the lead back out of these guys. And so the German chemists developed the EDTA and as a chelating or clawing agent to go in and start pulling these minerals, these metals back out of the body. And they started injecting into these guys and found their IQ scores were coming back up again, and they were able to stop the adverse effects of the lead paint. Well, what they also found out 20 years later, the guys who had gotten all these injections of the EDTA didn't have any heart disease because it bound up that free calcium that gets attached to the artery walls, causing hardening of the arteries, and it cleans out the artery walls. Plus, it also takes out the lead and the mercury and the aluminum. So it's a phenomenal product, and it needs to be used by everybody every single day. And I'm sure they probably have much more advanced ways of avoiding that. But that's the same exact thing I said, Doug, before I tested the water. I said, why would they spray us? Because they're spraying themselves. But then it goes back to Genesis chapter 6, back to the Bible. And it goes back to the whole thing with Noah and the ark and the Nephilim and the giants and all the stuff that was around back then in the book of Enoch. And yes, I'm awake. I know all of this stuff. And I've done research on all of it. And then who in the world's running the planet right now? But again, if you want to get a copy of the book, you can go to tenfoods.com. That's TENFOODS.com or 1-800-726-1834. 1-800-726-1834 or healthmasters.com too. But that's what it all boils back to. You know, it's interesting to me. Did you ever watch that show? What's the guy's name? It's he's got Brad Metzler Decoded. You ever watch that show? He's like on the History Channel. He did a very interesting show, and let me just share this with the listeners for a second, because I know you got a pretty good Christian audience, because I know Steve Quayle's on here. If everybody wasn't a Christian historian, they probably are now. And I love Steve Quayle, by the way. And Brad Metzler decoded had a whole show that he did on the Spear of Destiny. You can watch the show online. You can pull it up. Brad Metzler, decoded Spear of Destiny. And what's particularly interesting, watch the last 10 minutes of the show. He actually brings a globalist up. And the globalist was a he wasn't a globalist. He was a bodyguard for one of the globalists. And then he meets him in this church at the end of the broadcast. And they were talking about the Spear of Destiny and who stole the Spear of Destiny from Hitler. The Spear of Destiny is the spear that they put in the side of Jesus. And what is believed with the spear through legend is that whatever army holds the spear, they cannot be defeated. Well, somebody stole it from Hitler. Hitler, it was in the Austrian repository, and somebody got it from Hitler. And anyhow, Brad Metzler's talking about the Spear of Destiny this whole show. And finally he goes, well, the reality is this guy says he knows who took the Spear of Destiny. So the guy comes in there, he starts talking about all of this stuff, and he had a meeting one time with the bodyguards of these elite people who met with the President of the United States at will. And he finally said, these guys claim to be the Benigni Nephilim, the sons of the fallen, and they believe they're going to take that spear and they're going to go back to Jerusalem, rebuild the temple, they're going to go back to the Holy of Holies, they're going to cut themselves, and they're going to basically set up a one-world government, and they're going to rule the planet. That was on the History Channel. And you can watch it on that show, Brad. Yeah, that was crazy. I'm sitting there going, "You've got to be kidding me! I can't believe I just heard this on the History Channel." And he said, and Brad Metzler says, "Do you believe that?" And the guy looked at him and goes, "It doesn't matter whether I believe it or not. They believe it, and they're willing to die for it." See, what we have here, we have a group of people that you can track back all the way back to Nimrod that basically believe their bloodlines come all the way through, and these people believe that they're supposed to be in charge of the planet, and they don't consider us to be even human beings. They consider us to be, I guess, some type of soulless animals, and they don't care what they do to us, and that's the only explanation. I could go into more detail about this if you want. That's the only explanation that makes any sense why they're willing to kill so many of us at will like this. They think that we're just a chicken that gets his head cut off for breakfast or lunch one day. That's all they think we are. They don't think we're anything more than that.
This is
so they don't
the
care
exact
if they kill us or
conversation. Yeah, exactly. This is the exact conversation I had with someone very close to the in the intelligence community today. Exactly what you're saying, and how we are viewed by the globalists and what they're doing to us. It's absolutely horrific. So yeah, on the other side of the break, I definitely would like you to get into this a little bit more. And Doctor, I'll tell you this. Now, when we have guests on, I will get probably. Depending on the guest, I'll get a page maybe of emails. Right now, I can't even keep up with the number of emails I've gotten from people with questions for you. Before we hit the top of the hour break, I think we could probably dispense with this one question pretty quickly, because I think I know what the answer is. A question for you. What about farm-raised pork, organic pork, that consuming organic farm-raised pork? Yes or no?
Touch not the unclean thing, and I shall receive you. That's what the Bible says. Touch not. That pork is unclean, period. Sorry.
End of story.
I won't compromise on pork.
Okay.
God never compromised on it. I won't compromise on it.
Okay, Suzanne, there's your answer, and I got to tell you, I figured that would be an easy, short answer, and it was, and I appreciate your direct and honest approach to that. Folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. It is the 24th day of February 2014. Our very special guest, Dr. Ted Broer. I got to tell you, I'm fascinated by this. Visit his website, healthmasters.com. After the show, I'm going to make sure that we have your websites, your telephone number, all up directly to for our listeners. This is absolutely incredible, Joe. It really is.
That's so much information in the first hour. I'm already looking at how many times I got to go back and catch something that I missed as I was writing something else down. And 2 more hours to go here. It's been fantastic. Our guest tonight, who was just on Coast to Coast last week, and I got to go back and catch that show if you haven't. But our guest tonight, Dr. Ted Broer, international best-selling author, and here to talk to us about foods and what we need to do to prepare physically in this time and so much more. We'll be right back after these short messages. You're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Stay with us.
Was originally created and uploaded to YouTube by the Hagmann and Hagmann channel. To view the full show archives, please visit youtube.com/user/Hagmann and Hagmann.
Hour number 2 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Monday, February 24th, 2014. I'm Joe Hagmann, my co-host Doug Hagmann. We're the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. Our special guest today is Dr. Ted Breuer, and if you missed the first hour, I suggest anybody who missed it go back and listen to the archive as we went over the top 10 foods never to eat. Very important, some excellent information in there as why not to eat them on top of what foods you shouldn't eat. We went into why they should not be eaten and the damages that they can have on you as a human being, and especially the children who eat some of these foods and the way it can change their body and the chemistry of their body. With that, this second hour, Mr. Breuer, I'm going to hand it back over to you, and you can take off right where you wanted to go.
Absolutely.
Okay, Joe. Let's go ahead and go over the top 5 ways to burn body fat real quick, and then we'll go back to the book of Enoch and Genesis real quick, if you don't mind.
Oh, I love it.
Excuse me. Well, the number one way to burn body fat is eat six small meals a day. That's critical. I mean, you don't want to eat one giant meal before you go to bed at night because all you're going to do is store all those extra calories as fat. Very important. If you're a guy and you want to weigh 180 pounds, eat 1,800 calories a day. That's 10 times your ideal body weight. So you take 1,800 divided by 6 is 6 300-calorie meals. So basically you're eating snacks throughout the whole day and not giant sit-down meals. Second thing, we have a product called HGH Stimulate. It's on the top 10 or on the 10foods.com. And also, let's see, does he have to put in we just changed that browser. That's why I keep stumbling on that. Is www.10foods.com, TENFOODS. It's called HGH Stimulate, and that's not an HGH product. What it does, it stimulates the body's production of human growth hormone, which helps to burn and melt body fat. Plus, it acts like a natural Viagra in men. It really does do a good job for that without making you go blind and deaf, and that's at the 10foods.com website. And also, we also have that available at healthmasters.com, but you got to dig through everything trying to find it. Now, the next thing we need to realize is that we have to be doing low glycemic carbohydrates. In other words, you need to stay away from bread and pasta and rice. Now, remember, these carbohydrates that are a lot of these wheat products and all these different types of compounds, now with all the gluten in them, they've been sprayed heavily with Roundup. I mean, and with glyphosate. This stuff is unbelievably poisonous for human beings, and it needs to be avoided. And it's been linked now to celiac disease, and it's also been linked now to the problems with gluten sensitivity. And your body's not designed to eat large amounts of herbicides like that and not have side effects from it. So you really need to stay away from high glycemic carbohydrates anyhow, especially high fructose corn syrup. Doug, I can't even stress how important high fructose corn syrup is to avoid because, remember, the corn is sprayed with Roundup, for heaven's sakes. They've got Roundup-ready corn now they feed us, and they make the high fructose corn syrup from us. It is loaded with glyphosate. And so you don't want to put that stuff into your body, the high fructose corn syrup. Very, very important. Next thing we have to do is make sure you combine exercise as far as aerobic training and weight training together. Never let your workout go longer than 45 minutes. That's very, very important because then you start elevating cortisol, which is a muscle-wasting hormone, again, like that's what coffee does. And make sure you basically combine exercise together with the weight training and with the cardio. Your workout shouldn't take any longer than 45 minutes while you're in and out of the thing. And those are our top 5 ways to burn and melt body fat. Very easy to do. And also, one more thing, that's number 5, is you have to drink half your body weight in purified water per day with no fluorine and no chlorine. And guys, don't use fluoride toothpaste. Please don't use fluoride toothpaste. Don't use fluoride mouthwashes. If you want to keep the cavities out of your children, get them off the sugar. They're not going to get cavities. None of my kids have cavities. None of them ever get fluoride. None of them ever get fluoride rinses. I won't let the dentist, when I get my teeth cleaned, even put fluoride in my mouth, especially fluoride rinses because it's so contaminated. Look at a tube of toothpaste that has fluoride in it. It says, warning, if ingested, contact the Poison Control Center immediately. Well, there's a reason it says that on the toothpaste. It's because that toothpaste contains fluoride, and there's enough fluoride in a tube of some of these toothpaste to kill a small child. And it's that poisonous, and you don't need to put it in your bodies. I don't care what your dentist says. If the dentist don't want to wake up and realize how bad fluoride is, find another dentist. Find a natural biological dentist that doesn't believe in fluoride and just start doing that. And we'll gradually put the dentists out of business who want to give everybody fluoride treatments in their mouth. And those are our top 5 ways. And again, you go to healthmasters.com, or you can give us a call in the morning, and we'll be more than happy to help you.
10foods.com, healthmasters.com. Folks, bookmark those sites, and Doctor, we'll have actually the sites are linked off of our website right now at homelandsecurityus.com. So folks, you can go there and directly go right to 10foods.com. Okay, what do you brush your teeth with then, if not fluoride toothpaste?
Oh no, we've got toothpaste at Healthmasters that has no fluoride. None.
Okay. All right.
And it's delicious.
Right.
I mean, the stuff works great. I mean, it's the best toothpaste you've ever used, and it doesn't have any fluoride in it, and you don't have to worry about poisoning your children with something that says keep out of the reach of children on. I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, think about that for a second. I mean, fluoride is rat poison, for heaven's sakes. I mean,
sure.
Hydrofluorosilicic acid, byproduct of aluminum and fertilizer production, and we're basically putting it in our water. Are we insane? I mean, and we think it's okay. It's not okay. My gosh, you can't do stuff like that and not have consequences to it, Doug. And the problem is, everybody thinks, oh, well, the dentist said to do it. So what? Get a dentist who's not stupid. Get a smart dentist. I mean, it's nonsense. I mean, there's smart dentists out there. We go to a dentist who doesn't use any fluoride. You can find those, but don't be going. It's like the same thing. If you take your 5-year-old to the doctor, the first thing out of his mouth is let's put him on Ritalin. Go find another doctor.
Yeah,
if you go to the doctor and the doctor says your cholesterol's at 230, we've got to put you on statin drugs, go find another doctor. The studies have shown clearly, Doug, that when cholesterol drops below 200, that all disease rates go up, especially senile dementia, and cancer goes through the roof when cholesterol goes under 200. And all statin drugs have one common side effect, and they all do one thing, and they do it very well. Every stinking one of them cause cancer. And the problem is, why in the world do we think that's okay? It's just not okay. Cholesterol, when it used to be 250 to 300, we were told it was in the normal range. That is a good range, 250 to 300. There's nothing wrong with that. 200 to 300, that's okay. Under 200 is too low, and when the cholesterol drops under 200, you can't produce testosterone anymore. You basically stop having a sex drive. You start feeling tired and lethargic. Your brain goes to mush. Statin drugs should be pulled off the market. They should never be put on. In fact, in my book, that Breakthrough Health book, I give you 10 categories of drugs that you should never use and never put in your body and never take under any circumstances. In the back of that book, the last chapter is on the top 10 drugs never to use, but I don't want to cover that on the air from a libel standpoint. But you can get the book at the healthmasters.com. It's like, what is it, $25 or whatever. I mean, it's an incredible value for the book with 45 chapters in it. I mean, how much is your health worth? I mean, people go out and spend $100 on a pair of tennis shoes, and they won't spend $20 on their health. For heaven's sake, they'll go out and spend $300 on a meal, and they won't spend $20. You know I'm right. You know I'm right. They'll go out and spend $10,000 on storable food, but they won't spend $20 on a book to try to tell them how to stay healthy, not die before they get a chance to use storable food. It's crazy. But let's go back to Genesis chapter 6. This is an interesting adventure for me. I'm going to tell you my theory on all of this. You can agree with me or disagree, whatever you want to do. I don't care. People are listening to me. Just give me a chance to go through this for a second. And let me tell you what I think happens, since we're all speculating anyhow, and all we can do is go by the books of Enoch and the book of Genesis and a lot of the older books, and then we can look at some of the apocryphal texts that are out there as far as in the New Testament. But the reality is this. Something happened before we got here. I think we all agree with that. Okay? We've got pyramids. I mean, I've crawled down inside the belly of the Great Pyramid in Giza. I actually got camel hijacked by a bunch of camel jockeys who took us out and tried to extort money from us on the desert out there. I could tell you that story at a later day. And I mean, I could tell you crazy stories, but the point is, something happened to build these huge monuments. And I've been to Machu Picchu. I've been to Egypt, and they've built all of these temples and all these human sacrifice temples. And here's what's interesting. Human sacrifice has been going on and is still going on right now all over the world, has been, will continue to go on, and continue to go on forever and ever. That's how it's going to work until Jesus comes back and takes over the planet, okay? That's how that's going to work. In fact, if you go to Abraham's hometown of Ur, you will find there are, in the excavations, they have found human sacrificial ritual sites. And you know what's interesting to me, let me ask all the Christians that are listening tonight. I'm going to go ahead and give you a couple of quick questions and see if you can figure out how this works out. God forbid the sacrifice of human beings. Forbid it. But yet he asked Abraham to sacrifice his own son Isaac. Of course, he stopped Isaac and said, I don't require the sacrifice of humans. And throughout the entire Old Testament, he always detested it when the Israelites got out of Egypt. They were still worshiping on the high places and passing their children to the fire to Moloch and, sacrificing their children. Now, here's what's interesting about that. We've got to think and ask ourselves a question. Why was this going on? Why does, quote, Lucifer require the sacrifice of children, or Moloch, or whatever you want to call him? And why is this happening? And there's some very interesting things about that. The Catholic Church, they believed for 1,000 years that you had to take the Holy Communion before you died, which they believed the blood, the wine, and the grape juice and the bread would turn into the body and blood of Christ, and it would protect you on your journey to heaven, basically, so you wouldn't be attacked or eaten by the demons. And what's interesting to me is this. It seems strange that these human sacrificial networks, remember, what was the name of that one guy who was the head of the FBI for California, for L.A. County back in the 90s, who uncovered that huge sacrificial network? Do you remember that guy, Doug?
Ted Gunderson.
Yeah, that's right. Right. He and basically he went out. You can get his emails all over. You get his website. He's passed away now, but he talked about what they were doing with the sacrificial networks. I believe that's happening. Alex Jones talks about it. I believe he's right. David Icke talks about it. I believe he's right. Steve Quayle talks about it. I believe he's right. The Bible talks about it. I know the Bible's right. Okay, as far as the sacrificial to the things. And think about this. Back in '73 we passed Roe v. Wade. Not only we made it very efficient. We got to kill the children in utero, and basically sacrifice these poor children or whatever we were doing to them, and the horrible things that we've done now with the 60 million babies that have been aborted in the United States. Now all know how I feel about that. But what's interesting about this, we've got to go back to Genesis chapter 6. We've got to go back to We've got to go back to Abraham. We've got to go back to Moses, and we've got to go all the way back to Noah. And what was interesting is we always forget the timelines of how many thousands of, the 1,000 years a lot of these people lived, in the 500 years, and the 600 years, and the 800 years. And what's interesting to me with this whole thing with Abraham, God forbid the sacrifice of humans, but asked Abraham to sacrifice his own his own son. But he stopped him. He said, I don't want you to sacrifice humans. But yet we turn right around and we see what happened with Nimrod, as far as, the sacrifice of humans and all the things that they did. And Nimrod, a lot of historians, including Tom Horn, believe that he was a Nephilim. He's part fallen angel, which we know that the fallen angels, whatever you want to call them, were breeding with humans and producing these giants and these offsprings. And what I find fascinating is now that we mentioned this in the last hour, that these people now who are running the planet, so to speak, as far as the globalists who are in control, whoever they may be, claim to be the offspring of the benign Nephilim, and they're sons of the fallen. Now, that's interesting, because a couple of years ago, you're going to find this fascinating. I had a lady who was a Satanist basically attack me. Okay, I kid you not. Okay, and then she started sending these horrible, horrible, horrible letters to me, and all the stuff that she wanted to do to me and my family. Okay, I still got copies of them. And I knew at that point she was a Luciferian, was what they called themselves. And so I ended up taking her to court. I took the letters and I took them to court, and I got a restraining order hearing on her, Doug. And what was interesting is when they asked her in court, they said, are you basically a Luciferian? Are you a witch? Are you this? Are you this? Every time they asked her those questions, she pleaded the fifth. Isn't that interesting?
Huh.
And her grandfather, if I told you the name, you'd know who they were. Her grandfather was a huge general in the Korean War. And I thought, well, that's interesting. And so the point was, we had over 20 of these letters from all these places in the country that she had written to us from, with all these horrible things that she was writing in the letters. But she would not deny what she was. She would only plead the fifth. And see, and that's what we don't understand. There's a huge network of these people running around, and, David Icke points it out very clearly in his books, though I don't agree with all of David Icke's anti-Christian rhetoric. I don't believe any of that nonsense at all. I think David Icke's right about 90% of the stuff, but when he goes to the anti-Christian stuff, I don't agree with it. The same thing with Jesse Ventura when he goes to the anti-Christian stuff. I completely disagree with him because he's an atheist, because you can't explain what is happening from an atheistic standpoint. You can't explain it, Doug. And so it's deeper than that. It's heavier than that. This has been going on for a long, long time, and the whole point with the Georgia Guidestones and everything else is they've got to reduce the population of the planet. We know that. That's what they've stated. That's their goals. And they want to reduce the population of the planet, and they want to do it effectively and efficiently. And what better way can you do it with that, using drugs like the Gardasil shot, immunizations, statin drugs, all of these things, flu shots, all of this stuff, on and on and on and on, which have been shown to have massive increases in death rates associated with these different types of injections and diseases and drugs, etc. And here's the interesting thing about it is, if their stated goal is to reduce the population, we have to ask what for. I mean, are there just too many of us now? I mean, are we too many people to try to manage at this point in time, or what are we supposed to do? I don't know. But the whole thing is, if you don't take this thing to a spiritual realm, because Jesus himself said, it's not a matter of flesh and blood. This is a spiritual battle that we're in, with the different destinies that we, dimensions that we have. And what we have to understand is, like when Steve Quayle's talking about that Howron Collider over there, and they're trying to open up these portals. I've been to Geneva, Switzerland. You can't get anywhere near those facilities where they have those things going on. And I know one thing. They learned an awful lot, and the Nazis learned an awful lot, and I don't know where they got all that technology from, but the reality is there's a whole lot more stuff that's going on from a spiritual, third, fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional thing that we have any idea that's happening, Doug, and if we don't look at this thing from a spiritual standpoint, we'll never have any answers to it.
I agree on 100%. Which is why, by the way, we approach... this program does approach the news, the current events, the things that are taking place, and even when we talk about nutrition from a spiritual point of view. Otherwise, we are not getting the full picture. And now, let me share with you one more. Let me share with you one more thing about this. Now, this is important. Everybody listens to me for a second. Now, if you're not saved, you need to listen to me for a second. Okay, even in these alien abductions, when these quote unquote whatever they are and abduct people, okay, whether they're fallen angels or whatever they are. Every time that Yeshua is mentioned, the name of Jesus is mentioned, in every single case that's been recorded that we can find literature on, that person is put back where they were taken from, and they're not messed with anymore. See, what happens is we were bought for a price, and when we have the blood of Jesus that sanctifies us, we change. Our DNA literally changes. We literally become an anathema to these spirits when we die as far as our souls are concerned, and they can't do anything to us, and then we get to go to heaven to be with God. And what's interesting, I personally believe, when the Bible says that Satan runs about as a roaring lion, seeking those whom he may devour, I don't believe that's a metaphor. He's been for millennia of time called the eater of men's souls. And I personally believe that when we become saved and we become born again, our DNA literally changes, and they can no longer eat our soul or do what they want to do to us if we believe in a literal hell. I don't believe it's possible for them to do that. And people, listen to me tonight. You're hearing it from a research biochemist from Florida State University. I mean, I know the globalists. I know President Bush. I know his son. I know Schwarzkopf. I've met all of them. Of course, Schwarzkopf is gone now. But the point is, I'm telling you, you've got to be right with God. You've got to be right with Jesus Christ. It's the blood of Christ that sanctifies you. And for some reason, they cannot deal with that, and it does something to our DNA. And so if you don't want to have yourself eaten when you die, I guess, with your soul, you've got to realize that you're going to have to become a Christian. You've got to be born again. You've got to be saved. And if that doesn't trigger you as far as being saved, I don't know what else to say to you, Doug. I don't know what else I can say to that. I mean, it's all about this. I'm 58 years old, Doug. If I'm playing 18 holes of golf right now, I'm like on the back 3 holes. I'm on the 16th hole right now. I mean, my peak of my life as far as my energy, my physical prowess, and everything are behind me. I know that. I'm almost 60 years old. But the point is, we're just getting started. I mean, eternity is a long, long time, and we've got to be sure and be right with God while we're here so we can continue just to go on and be with Christ. And that's why it's so important that we realize that we've got to accept Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. We've got to be born again. I was born again in 1979 at Florida State University while I was in graduate school there. And I tell you what, my life's never been the same yet. And what he's done with us, and this is something that's also very interesting, because of who he is and what he's done for us and the blood covenant that he's established between us, he literally allows us to change the fabric of space-time in our own life by the words of our mouth and the power of our own confessions. And I know that people think, well, that sounds kind of silly to me. Well, no, I'm not. I'm being very sincere right now. Everything on this planet is made of sound waves. I mean, we've learned that. The entire Earth, if you took the space from between the atoms and you collapsed it, would be about the size of a basketball, if that big.
I mean, everything is sound. It's all frequencies. That's why HAARP is so dangerous. That's why the chemtrails are so dangerous, because of what they do as far as amplitudes of frequencies. And, of course, you guys have done multiple shows on this. The reality is this. When you can interfere with sound waves, there's a really good book you need to all read, and it's called The Men Who Stare at Goats. Crazy book. I read it on a cruise that I was on last year. And they said if they hit you with the right sound wave, they can create instantaneous nausea, elation, depression, instantaneous, just by hitting you with the right frequency. And the thing about it is that our bodies are made of sound. Tesla knew this. And that's why when he developed his Wardenclyffe Tower, he didn't want to really activate that thing, even though J.P. Morgan stopped him because of the free energy thing, because he was in cahoots with Edison and the Rothschild group. You see, I read a lot of stuff, Doug, and I read all the time. And the craziest thing about all of it, no, the thing is nuts is that, you've got to understand that most people who are academics like me, I was a college professor for 2 years, they don't read anything other than in their field, okay? But because I was raised by immigrant parents and my mom was from Germany, I want to understand what's going on. And the thing that nobody gets is the frequency, the words of our mouth. The Bible says the power of life and death is in the tongue. Basically, it says, by all of our words we shall be judged and we shall be acquitted. You've got to realize we all have to pull together at a higher harmonic frequency, and we've got to stop these globalists for what they're doing. We've got to believe and pray to God every single day that they're going to be exposed. They're going to be taken out of office. These stupid chemtrail pilots are going to not want to spray this stuff on us anymore. And we've got to start speaking the words that are not as if they were. That's faith. Now, I'm not talking about name it, claim it, blab it, grab it. And if your preacher's telling you that give me money and I'll be blessed, you need to go to another church. Don't be doing that kind of nonsense with those guys, because if their books aren't open and you don't know where the money's going, you need to know where the money's going if you're giving your tithe and you're giving your money to that church. That's just a sidebar for you guys. But the reality is this. We can literally change the fabric of space-time by the words of what we speak. Because remember what the Bible says. Ask as if you've already received it. It will be given unto you. That's in the past tense. So you've got to pray these things as if they've already happened, and then what happens is the fabric of space-time will change to adjust, because it has to, because God cannot stand incongruities, and he will give you what you ask, but you have to understand he wants to do it for a purpose that's going to be right with him. He doesn't want to do it so you can amass a fortune or do whatever you want to do. I mean, that's not why he does it. That's one of the reasons that. Let me tell you a story. This is gonna. You guys are listening to me already. If you're still with me after what I've just told you about the Nephilim, then you're probably gonna be with me for the rest of the time. I went galt back in the 90s. I had enough of all of it. I quit. I said, I'm done. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and raise kids, and I'll have my website. It'll make a little bit of money, and we'll pay the bills, and I'll just go down the road. But I'm not going to be living in a suitcase anymore. I have spoken with the Bushes. I have spoken with the Schwarzkopf. I have spoken with Colin Powell, who, by the way, is a really nice guy when you meet him in person. And I've done all of this stuff with all of these people, and I've done it for all these years. I've spoken to 1 million people at seminars. I've spoken to groups as large as 40,000 people, Doug, in one arena. I've done thousands of talk shows. And I had enough. I said, I don't want to do it anymore. And so I quit. And I basically just chilled out, okay? And then about 2.5 years ago, I was wanting to do another book release. And things just, business was real slow because I hadn't done anything in a long time. And I started praying, and I started thinking, God, what in the world, are we not doing anymore that we used to do? And I couldn't get any answers. And finally, in the middle of the night, now this is going to freak you out because it freaked me out. Well, it may not freak you out. You've heard everything from Stephen Quayle. Nothing freaks you out if you listen to Steve Quayle. I was laying in my well, no, it doesn't. I love Steve Quayle. Gosh, I love Steve Quayle. And the guy's awesome. Okay, I love his enthusiasm. But it was so funny. I was just praying. So I'm laying in bed. I go to sleep. It's on a Sunday night, and in my dream I start praying. I start crying out to God in my dream, and I'm saying, Lord, what's going on? How do I build my momentum back up? I'm ready to go back to work. I'm ready to start getting things moving again. And I had no answer. And this went on it seemed like it was for months in this dream. And finally, God speaks to me, Doug, and he speaks to me in perfect German. Isn't that crazy? And he says to me, he goes, because I was asking him why we weren't motivated, why we weren't doing what we had done, why we weren't speaking to the arenas, why we weren't doing this, why we weren't doing that. And he said to me something very interesting. He said, Du gebrauchst mir nicht mehr. And in German what that means is, you don't need me anymore. In other words, it was a very polite way of slapping me upside the head and getting my attention. And I woke up, and I was shivering. I was soaking wet in sweat. I had to go get in the shower. I was shaking. And And I thought, my God, I've just been rebuked by God. I hear the audible voice of God in a dream, and I'm getting chewed out. I said, this is awful. I said, but it's awful also good because he spoke to me. And here's what nobody understands, is when God was with me and is with me now and has always been with me, he kind of like plays checkers with you. You make a move, he makes a move, he makes a move, you make a move, he makes a move, you make a move. And it's fellowship. That's what he wants from us. We're his children. He wants us to have a relationship with him. That's what he wants. And what ends up happening is I got to the point where I was like, well, God, you've done so much for me. I'm just going to chill out. I'm going to just take it easy and raise the kids. And I quit asking God to be part of what we were doing. That's the truth. And I didn't understand because I didn't want to be constantly bothering him with stuff because he had done so much for me. And he finally let me know in no uncertain terms when he told me that it's not about the stuff. He doesn't care about the stuff. He cares about the relationship. He cares about you knowing who he is, being in covenant with him, and having him as your friend, as your God, as your master, as your Lord, as your king, and as your covenant partner. And that's what he showed me in that dream. And he said, basically, Ted, you can do anything you want to do. I've always told you that. But you've got to have me as your partner. And that's what separates us from the heathen, the people who don't believe in Jesus Christ, because we have a blood covenant through Jesus Christ to God Almighty, in which he becomes literally our partner on this planet, and he'll do anything you ask as long as you ask it for the right reasons and the right motives. But here's what's also interesting that I've learned. When you pray these things, you have a spiritual umbrella over you and your family and your household of what God is willing to do. I can't pray over King Obama up in the White House up there and ask God to do things for Obama or to change his mind or do other things, but Obama's just a figurehead anyhow. We all know that. He's being run by the globalists. I can't change that because they're all praying against what I'm trying to pray. That's why if you're in a household and you're married and you have a wife and you're married to your husband or whatever, you've got to make sure you're in agreement with the prayers that you pray, and you've got to pray every single day, and you've got to pray out loud. You've got to speak into the fabric of space-time because all this is a frequency or sound wave, and the sound waves changes the frequency and creates incongruities in the sound waves, and the sound waves, according to God's Word, have to come in compliance with what you speak over your own family. That's what the most important thing is. I can tell you that tonight. So every morning my wife and I get up and we pray and we thank God for the things that are not as if they were, and we thank God for our children. We thank God for all the things that he's done for us, for all the blessings that we have, for our great marriage, and we thank him for that. And we do it audibly, out loud, together in agreement. And I'm telling you what, it has completely revolutionized my life. I mean, we're back to doing, big shows again. We're back to doing, coast to coast. We're doing all of these things that before, we had done. And the craziest thing it is, if God can do it for me, he can do it for anybody who's listening to this show tonight, because God is no respecter of persons. Now, I'm going to repeat what I said a minute ago because I said it quickly. And forgive me for talking so fast, because when I start talking about this stuff, I get real excited. I'm as excited about this stuff as I'm about the nutrition stuff. If you're in a church and they've got closed books, you don't know what the pastor makes, you don't know what anybody makes in the church, and you hear from the preacher, basically, maybe not in these exact words, give me money and you'll be blessed. I suggest if you're not being fed in that church and you're not happy in that church and you're kind of curious about where the money is going, that you ask the pastor where the money is going and you find out. Because I've done a lot of shows and a lot of TV shows and a lot of TV evangelists. I've been on almost every major Christian network in America. And I tell you what, some of these guys have got some serious issues. And the reality is that you don't have to give other people money so they'll be blessed. The reality is God will do everything he can for you and give you more than you've ever imagined. But the reality is you've got to put your seed in the good soil. And that doesn't mean necessarily some TV evangelist or whatever, but you've got to put your seed in the good soil. If you put good seed in the bad soil, you don't get a harvest from it. You don't get anything from it. And that's what nobody understands. When you speak the things that are not as if they were, you've got to make sure that you're doing the right thing, that you're helping the poor. That every time I drive by these people on the side of the road that are begging for money, Doug, every time, I always stop. I always give them $5 or $10. And people say, well, you shouldn't do that. They're just going to buy alcohol. And my response is, if I was standing on the side of the road begging for money, I'd probably go buy alcohol too. I mean, the reality is, of course they need to. Well, what do you want me to say? I could sit here and paint some halo over my head. I'm not going to do it. Because, the reality is if you're standing on the side of the road, it can't get much worse than that. We need to realize that as Christians, we're supposed to be doing what we're supposed to be doing. Don't give the guy 50 cents or wave at him or give him a tract, tell him that Jesus loves him. Give him some cash and tell him Jesus loves him. Because the reality is we've got to learn that we've got to do the things that God said for the least of these, he said we need to do for all of us. And if we do that together as a team, if all of us pray in the aggregate, Doug, if we all pray together in the aggregate that things change, we'll change this country. If the preachers will get off their sorry bottoms and quit worrying about their stupid 501(c)(3) corporations and their tax-exempt status and start telling the truth about what's going on with the globalists like they did it back in 1776, the preachers in the pulpit are the ones who changed this country 250 years ago when we were set free from the tyranny of England. If the preachers will do that again and tell the truth, we will change this country, because the media is not going to do it. And that's what they do. They use that 501(c)(3) status as a hammer over their heads, telling them that they're going to lose all that if they don't do what they're supposed to do. Your preacher needs to be telling you the truth. If he's not telling you the truth, you need to say, "Hey, preacher, you need to tell me the truth, or I got to go someplace where I'm going to hear the truth." And that's what we all need to do. And that's why Stephen Quayle is anti, these types of churches. Alex Jones is against these types of churches. I'm against these types of churches. You've got to be hearing the truth in the pulpit on Sunday mornings. Or were you supposed to hear unless you go to alternative media like we're doing tonight? And the reality is that preachers need to know the truth and they need to be preaching the truth, because the truth will set the people free. It always has and it always will, Doug.
Amen, brother. I'll tell you what, I could not have said that any better than you. Wow. We're not getting the truth anywhere from the media or from the pulpits, as you point out, and it's sad. It really is, and there are so many people.
With the exception of Chuck Baldwin.
Okay, yeah, there are exceptions. Chuck Baldwin being one, certainly. Wow, you had said something earlier, which I've been researching and talking with people and know about this, and in fact, I talked to Steve Quayle about this as well. Harmonics, the DNA, the sound waves.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah,
okay.
It's everything. It's called semantics. You can literally change the structure. Don't you remember in the Old Testament when Moses was told by God to go to the Pharaoh, and he said, "Throw your staff down, and your staff will turn into a snake." Do you remember what the Pharaoh's magicians did? They threw their staffs down and they turned into snakes.
Okay.
Now you think about what I'm just saying. This isn't a story here that's not true. This is from the Torah, the 5 first books of the Levitical law that was given to Moses, on the mountain, plus Moses was there when this happened. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The Torah, the Levitical law, given to Moses through the word, through the mouth of God himself upon the mountain when the children of Israel escaped from the clutches of the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh's magicians turned their staffs into snakes. Now, they crawled around on the floor, and then Moses' staff ate the other snakes. But the point is, they mimicked almost every single plague and things that were done. They mimicked it with their magicians. The reason for that is, always remember this, Lucifer was probably the second most, was probably behind Jesus Christ himself, was probably one of the most powerful beings ever created by God. And the reality is, they taught all of these ancient mystery religions and arts all the way from Nimrod back to Egypt, including how to build these pyramids. And they understood that with sound waves. When I was standing in the temple up at Machu Picchu last year in Peru, up in the Andes, I'll never forget, they had a prayer chamber. And I actually did this on videotape. I went into this prayer chamber, and I just started, I just made a couple of, consonants, like hum, like that. And when I got inside this prayer chamber and I stuck my head in it, it was 100 times louder than I was doing it. It was crazy. And what that does, that activates that pineal gland. And these magicians knew from Nimrod and these fallen angels and the Nephilim, and it talks about it in the book of Enoch, how to change physical matter by the use of sound. That's how they were able to move the pyramids and move the rocks and move the stones and do all the other things they did. And see, the technology that they had back then was far more advanced than what we have today in many areas. And the craziest thing is, we think human beings have evolved. We haven't evolved. We've de-evolved since Adam. Adam was a super being, for heaven's sakes. And the reality is, we think that we're all of this and all of that. We're not all of this and all of that. The United States is leading the world when it comes to heart disease, to diabetes, and to cancer, for heaven's sakes. We've de-evolved. We're not what we were in the garden. And the craziest thing is that people don't get that. And you've got to go all the way back to Genesis. The Nephilim and the fallen angels had so contaminated the DNA pool of the plant. This is from Dr. Chuck Missler, and he's absolutely right. in Genesis chapter 6 that every thought of every man was evil all the time, it says in Genesis chapter 6. And there were giants in those days, and they were there then and then also afterwards, which means they kept their mischief going after the flood was over with. Apparently they stepped back through the time rift portal and they came back into this universe and they started doing the whole thing over again. That's where Goliath came from. And what's interesting also, Tom Horn says in one of his books, that the Tower of Babel under Nimrod was built underneath a stargate, and that Nimrod could still see it because he still had the half Nephilim eyes, but he was not unable to get to it. So he was going to build this Tower of Babel up maybe 1,000, 1,500 feet into the air until he went to this time rift, this time portal, this portal into heaven, and so he could step back into heaven. And remember what God said in Genesis. If we allow him to do this, there'll be nothing he will not be able to accomplish. He knew that if he could step back through that portal, that the whole thing would get messed up, so they could confuse the language and it was all spread. But we have to realize the sound, the use of sound, is the entire planet is made of sound. Remember when Tesla hooked you could get his biography. He had a machine, he had an oscillator, and he wanted to find out, he was living in this big skyscraper in New York, and he hooked this oscillating machine to the steel columns on both sides of his windows in his apartment. And he started messing with the amplitude to try to find the sine wave of the steel. And when he found the sine wave, he created a resonance frequency inside of the steel, and the entire building started shaking, the windows started falling out, and when the police got there to find out what the heck was going on in this building, he was taking a sledgehammer to the resonance frequency machine trying to stop it. It's in his
right.
biography, for heaven's sakes.
Right.
And see,
yep.
that's what sound does. Yeah, Judy Wood. Now, whether she's right or wrong, I don't know. She wrote how did where did the towers go? She's absolutely right in asking the questions. How did the towers turn to dust? A lot of people think there were micro-nukes were used. A lot of people think there was thermite that was used. Judy Wood thinks there was some kind of space weapon platform that was used to basically cause molecular destabilization. But the reality is that we don't know exactly how they did it, what type of technology they used. But those towers turned to powder, Doug. I mean, you can see the pictures. They turned to powder. The amount of debris that was at the ground.
Yeah, we might not know with precision how they did it, but we certainly know how it didn't happen. And
it didn't happen with an airplane. Judy Wood is so good on this. She goes. The problem is everybody asks the wrong questions about the trade towers. She goes, everybody wants to know, how did the airplanes take the towers down? How did the thermite take the towers down? How did the airplanes take the towers down? The question is, how did the towers turn to powder? That's the question. How did the towers turn to powder? And she's absolutely right. If I know Dr. Deagle thinks it was micro-nukes that did it. I know that Judy Wood thinks it was basically some kind of frequency modulator from a space-based platform, which we know they have. I mean, I don't know what did it, but all I know is those towers sure came down.
Exactly. Yeah, we interviewed Dr. Wood on our program, I think probably a year ago now, or
just once. Yeah, it was about a year ago.
Yeah, and it was very interesting. Her textbook, or her book, it reads like a textbook, and I got to tell you, reading that it's a heavily cited book makes you think. And how many people realize?
I'm looking at her book right here, and
okay.
Where did the towers go? I mean, phenomenal book, and it makes you think. I mean, the reality is this: why were all those people jumping out of those windows? I mean, why? When she said over 1,000 people jumped to their deaths that day, it was raining bodies. I mean, if I was in a building that was burning, unless I was physically on fire, I wouldn't jump 110 stories and kill myself. I would be thinking, well, they're going to come rescue me in a few minutes. But she says because of the microwave energy that was being beamed into the building, they were literally being cooked alive, and the pain was so bad they were willing to kill themselves.
I was in New York right after 9/11, and I was able to see. I was taken into the restricted areas by one of the detectives there, and it was I can't even describe it. The stains on the pavement. I just can't even describe it, except to say that whatever happened inside those towers to make those people jump. I just can't.
Well, no. She said in her book that they're having a hard time getting into the towers because they said it was literally raining bodies. And so something happened in there. Yeah. Something happened in those towers. And see the whole. It may be a combination. It may have been a space-based platform using the harmonic frequency, which would be microwaves. It could have been thermite. It could have been mini nukes. It could have been a whole bunch of different things. But the problem with the mini nuke theory is that the basements were still intact. I mean, none of this makes any sense. I don't know whatever they do. See, the problem that we have, Doug, is the weaponry that we have in the United States is so advanced. It is so advanced that we have no idea what we have anymore. And, last year, I couldn't even believe it. King Obama was just absolutely bent on starting a war with China and Russia with Syria, for heaven's sakes, and Vladimir Putin had to get involved in the middle of that thing to put a big stop to it. It's complete and total nonsense what's going on in Washington right now. Like I said, we've got a bunch of feral cats loose in Congress and the White House, and they all need to be relocated. This is complete and total nonsense. And you know a lot more about all this stuff than I do. I'm the biochemist, nutrition guy. I just read a lot, and I've got my own theories as to why all of this stuff happened. But I know about food, and I know why so many people are dying of heart disease and diabetes and cancer and ADD and autism. I know why that's happening because that's my field. But all these other things, that's why I admire you and Alex Jones and Stephen Quayle so much for telling the truth about this. That's why I decided not to be galt anymore and actually step out and say something about this because I realized my education could help do that.
Sure can, and you do have a lot of great and very informative things to say, intelligent things to say, and people that need to, as far as the food aspect is concerned, to really take into consideration. And one thing we can all do is at least try to, change the way if we have bad habits, whether it's bad behaviors as far as, sinning is concerned, those need changed, and as well as how we treat our bodies. We're, as you said at the beginning of the show, we have an obligation to make sure that we are strong enough here with our bodies, we have enough strength and energy to continue to do this mission that God has called us to do in these times. And we can't do that if we're overweight and out of shape and without any type of energy to do this right. So we need to treat our bodies correctly, and that entails eating properly, as there are so many weapons. We talked about water and the weapons, weapons in the water, bioweapons in the water, such as fluoride, all the different types of problems that we see coming from foods, whether it's genetically modified foods or heavy metals from the chemicals that are spraying to the what the doctors give you and the pharmaceuticals and the vaccines. We are up against a wall of disease by doing what the world says, and we have to come out of that. And when the Lord tells us to come out of the world, He's not just saying that in a sense of come out of the way society is. It's out of all the society, because they know that it's so corrupt. It can kill us, even if it's just our mind that we take out of this world. So,
well, that's exactly right. For another example, one of the biggest things, we have a whole chapter in the book on sleeping pills and how bad sleeping pills are for you, and natural alternatives to sleeping pills, natural alternatives to Viagra and all these other different chemicals, what the GMOs really do, what the fluoride really does, what Roundup really does. All of this stuff is in the book, and it's in detail. If you already know all this stuff, just get the book for one of your friends, for heaven's sake. Go to healthmasters.com and order it and give it to people that you know and that you care about and you love. What better gift could you give somebody than the gift of health if they're willing to read it and to learn? The stuff that we're talking about tonight about, we're talking about theoretical biophysics, for heaven's sakes, and the fabric of space-time, okay? Well, we can have all kinds of different theories on that, but I do know what helps people as far as lowering blood pressure, cholesterol, and triglycerides. That's easy. Let's not talk about the elementary truths here at all about that again. We've already covered all of that. It's super easy to stay healthy. You have to really work at being sick. You got to make sure you watch TV every single night when you eat dinner. You got to make sure you eat only GMO foods, make sure everything's loaded with high fructose corn syrup. You have to make sure you cook everything in safflower and corn oil, which is unbelievably high in omega-6, which makes your blood like sludge. You got to make sure you yell at your wife during the dinner and fuss at her because you don't like the way it was cooked. You got to scream at the kids and spank them in the middle of your dinner. And you got to make sure you elevate your cortisol as much as you possibly can in order to be as stressed out as you possibly can. And you got to make sure you go ahead and have about a 2,000-calorie snack before you go to bed. It really takes a lot of work to stay sick, but that's how people live. That's how people live,
Wow.
And that's why everybody's dying of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer, because they don't realize that they've been taught the lie. They've been given the lie. And see, here's the thing. The truth will set everybody free, Doug. And everything I told you tonight, except for the theories of biophysics and all the stuff like that I can't prove, I know I'm right on. I broke the story on aspartame almost 30 years ago, and I told everybody how toxic it was. I told the story about hydrogenated trans fats and what they did to the body and how they massively increased the risks of heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. I told everybody that 30 years ago. I warned them about the dangers of GMO foods. I've broken all of these stories, 30 years ago. I've been doing this since 1980, for heaven's sakes. And the craziest thing is, every time I tell the people the truth, I was on a national talk show. In fact, I'm on it 2 more days this week. Tomorrow and the next day I'm on This Is Your Day. It's on the Trinity Broadcast Network, and it's also on Daystar if people want to watch that. 30-minute show on. It's called This Is Your Day, and it's on at let's see, at 10:30 in the morning Eastern Standard Time on Trinity Broadcast Network, and at 5:30 Eastern Standard Time on Daystar tomorrow and on Wednesday. And you can see what I look like and see my wife and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is, I've broken these stories. Years ago, let me tell you a story. I was doing Steve and Vicky up in Atlanta, Georgia. And they were the number one show. I think they were Star 97 or Star 95 FM. This is back in the 90s. And I was doing this show with him on the top 10 foods never to eat, plus a bunch of other stuff then. And it was a 20-minute show. And then we basically got off the show. And then the next day they called me back and they said, well, we got a big blowback from one of the universities here in town. And they said that basically you were nuts and that basically you said that butter was better than margarine and margarine's a lot better than butter. And they disagree with you. And they're demanding equal airtime to basically combat what you've done as far as destroying the health of the people in Atlanta. I just started laughing. And I said, really? They said, well, they're saying that basically that you're wrong about trans fats and hydrogenated oils and that butter is a bad product and people need to be eating all the margarine and Crisco. They were teaching it in one of the top nutrition schools in Atlanta. And I started laughing, and I said, okay, you let them do what they want to do. I don't care. And so they sure enough, they came on and demanded equal airtime. I didn't listen to the show because I was already back home again. Well, about 6 months later, the Food and Drug Administration came out and said that all trans fats had to be labeled because they were so poisonous and so bad for you that they need to be pulled out of the food supply. They were going to require labeling on trans fats. I just started laughing, and I said, well, here's that major university just basically decided that they were absolutely wrong. So I remember a few months later, Steve called me up, and we did a telephone interview like I'm doing with you right now, because usually I was in studio with him. And I'll never forget, he goes, well, Dr. Ted, I got to ask you a question. Tufts University said you were totally insane to say that margarine was bad and butter was better. And he goes, how do you respond to that? Okay? And I started laughing, and I said, Steve, I stand convicted. I'm nuttier than a fruitcake. I actually believe the U.S. doesn't have to lead the world when it comes to heart disease, to diabetes, and cancer, that the leading cause of death in our kids doesn't have to be cancer, that we don't have to have 10 million children on Ritalin, ADD, and Adderall drugs, and that we don't have to have all these people coming down with senile dementia. And if that makes me crazy, you can go ahead and lock me up because I'm nuttier than fruitcake. And he started laughing. He goes, well, you heard what the FDA said. I said, yep, I did. And I said, they're making them label all the trans fats, and I was right again. And I've told this stuff to people over and over and over, Doug, for all of these years. It's easy to stay healthy. Like you said a few minutes ago, a lot of it is just common sense. But the problem is the manufacturers have lied to you so much. Who's told you the truth about BPA and what it does to the gestational cycles of women? Who talks about that stuff? Who talks about how you chemically castrate a little boy in utero by giving that mother additional exogenous estrogen? Nobody talks about that. I talk about that because I know what it does, and I've seen the results and what it does to brain chemistry. I know what it does. I've worked with thousands of patients on an individual basis in my office years ago when I was still in practice, helping them to lower blood pressure, cholesterol, triglycerides, blood sugar levels. I could tell them exactly what to do. I could tell them exactly how to fix the problems, and the problems were always easy. It was all about food choices. And now, all these years later, you've got to stay off the GMOs. You've got to stay off all the Roundup crops. You've got to stay off all of the glyphosate stuff. You can't be putting this stuff into your body, or you're going to get celiac disease, and you're going to end up with gluten insensitivity and toxicity and allergies to that, and you're going to destroy your entire endocrine system. And the problem is, if you want to know an uber evil corporation that's doing this, it's Monsanto, Doug. Monsanto is the one that's doing all of this. They're awful.
Yeah, well, and they've got one of the biggest lobbyist presence in D.C. It's ridiculous. Follow the money, as we often say. I mean,
well, I used to call it the revolving door policy of the Food and Drug Administration. Now, these guys get this stuff passed, be put into our food supply, and immediately leave their positions with the FDA and go to work for the exact company which they just promoted the product for. It's the nuttiest thing I've ever seen. I mean, we need to have a cleansing. If the people are not constitutional people, and listen to me, I'm about to get myself upset here. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm neither one of them, okay? My favorite president my lifetime has been John F. Kennedy. He's a Democrat. My second favorite president was Ronald Reagan, but now we all know that George Bush was running the White House pretty much the whole time that Ronald Reagan was in there after Ronald Reagan got shot. I mean, we all know that. But the reality is this. The reason they killed John Kennedy, you know it and I know it, had a lot to do with Executive Order 11110, which he took the rights to print the money again and took it away from the Federal Reserve Bank. We know it, you know it, we all know it. And when he did that newspaper convention, he warned everybody about the secret conspiracy that was covet-based, and he did that whole speech on that. He basically signed his own death warrant, Doug. You know, and the craziest thing, he said he was going to expose all of these people. And Andrew Jackson did the exact same thing with the Bank of America back in the 1830s, and he said they were a den of vipers and of thieves, and he was going to root them out. By God Almighty, he was going to root them out, and he did. And he got rid of that central bank. Then they basically started. Then the Rothschild Bank spun to the South and the North to start the doggone Civil War. You know the whole story. I mean, gosh, you can read history and see the truth of what's going on if you just read it from a realistic standpoint instead of a skewed Northern interpretation written by the government that basically slaughtered the South. And here's the interesting thing. Now, remember, I don't have an axe to grind with this. I wasn't here. My mom was in Germany, okay? We got our own problems over there, okay? My father's my father's father came over like in 1880, 20 years after the Civil War. I didn't own any slaves. I wasn't even involved. My family wasn't even here during the Civil War. But I can sure read enough history books to know that the skewed interpretation of what happened in the Civil War when the government tyranny started and we started ruling by the War Powers Act and by executive privilege after with Lincoln, that wasn't right. And Lincoln should have never told Sherman to march to the sea and burn Atlanta like he did and do that 60-mile swath all the way to the ocean and kill all those Americans. I mean, the whole thing is nuts. You can't even read history and see what happened and think that was okay. It wasn't okay. That's what the federal government is capable of doing, and that's what they're probably going to do to us again with all the 1.4 billion rounds of ammunition. And why does the Postal Service need ammunition, Doug? I mean, why does the Postal Service want to order ammunition? What's wrong with this? And why isn't anybody reporting on this stuff besides the alternative media?
Exactly. You're 100% right. When you said about the postal workers there, I just thought back to the Seinfeld episode with Newman. Yeah, I'm sorry, invoking brain dead TV shows.
And I heard I heard a stat from a professor on overpopulation this last weekend. I'm not sure how old this was. It maybe been a year or 2 years. It could have been just a little bit older than that. But he was talking about how people like Ted Turner's and the Bill Gates and all these people are throwing around the eugenics and overpopulation, saying there's too many people in the world. And this researcher said that you can actually fit every single person in the world, at almost 7 billion people, inside of the city of Jacksonville, as it is one of the biggest cities. It is the biggest city in the country as far as land mass is concerned. And he, went on to and he was talking about creation versus evolutionism, and how if the world was created as long ago as scientists say, then you'd have 170-some thousand people per square foot now at the rate it was going. But it's only been 6,000 years, and he was making the case for creationism and not overpopulation, over regulation, over governmental interference. And if one looks into those stats, I'm sure you can find what he was talking about. But it's not a problem of overpopulation. It's not a problem of everything that they're saying, man-made global warming. It's a problem of change, and it's a problem of the times we're in that they're trying to hide. And we're seeing these things change so rapidly.
Well, no, you're right. The biggest problem they have right now is that they've gone berserkoid with the chemtrails and weather modification. We know that. I mean, back in 2004, we live here in Polk County, Florida, and I'll never forget, we had 3 hurricanes go over our house in 6 weeks. Every 2 weeks we had a hurricane go over Central Florida. It was almost like they marked a bullseye in the center of the state, and they said, okay, let's see how good we are with all of this storm directional stuff, and let's try to push these storms in these certain directions. The statistical odds of 3 hurricanes in one season going over my county is infinitesimal. I mean, it's probably millions to one. And the craziest thing is it happened. And also I'm looking at it going, okay, this is just nuts, okay? And I don't know if they're directed storms. I don't know what they're doing. I'm not the one running the HAARP research centers. But all I know is we have the capability of moving high-pressure zones around because of what we can do with heating the atmosphere. We've proven that with the atmospheric, the heaters that we've got placed all over the planet now with these HAARP machines. And the thing about it is, Doug, is, they don't tell us anything. And then again, the Pentagon comes out, a couple of months ago and says, we're not going to lie to the American people anymore. We want people to know that Area 51 really exists. Do they think we're that stupid that we didn't believe it didn't exist? What's wrong with these people?
Exactly.
I mean, and that was the biggest disclosure they gave us, like, okay, whatever, now we're all happy that you told us that. Like, we weren't all you. They must think that everybody's brain dead. The problem is, here's what they try to do with the Internet. Okay, they tried to further destroy the fabric of society with the Internet through pornography. That's the main reason that the Internet got going to start with, because that was the only thing that kept it financed. And the craziest thing about it is it's turned back on them now. Now they don't know what to do, because what they did is they woke everybody up who wants to be awakened. And the crazy thing, it's kind of like sitting in your bedroom at night, and you got a cat burglar comes walking in the house, and he got through the alarm system, and he's sitting there, and you're sleeping. He's taking whatever he wants. Okay, now all of a sudden with the Internet, with shows like yours and with Alex Jones, the cat burglar comes in the house, but you're not sleeping. You're standing there with just a 12-gauge shotgun aimed at his head, thinking, you know what, I knew you were coming. I heard about you. And now all of a sudden they're like, uh-oh, now we've been caught. So now they just start all this obfuscation, all this lies, all this nonsense. You know, when SEAL Team 6 supposedly killed Osama bin Laden, who died of kidney failure back in 2001, and all of this nonsense happened a few years ago when they had this big briefing at the White House, and they had all these pictures of Hillary Clinton, everybody sitting in the room with this, you know, watching the raid, you know, with Osama bin Laden. I looked at Sharon, and I just put my head in my hands. I said, what's wrong? And she goes, I said, all the boys involved with this are dead. They're all dead. Every one of these boys are going to die. And she goes, what are you talking about? I said, this is SEAL Team 6. They're going to die. And she goes, well, that'll never happen. It wasn't, what was it, 5 months later, that whole helicopter of SEAL Team 6 got shot down, Doug?
Extortion 17, that's right. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. And I mean, and I don't know if those are the same SEAL Team guys that were over there with Osama bin Laden, but the point I know is, you know, these dead men tell no tales. And the craziest thing is that we've got to realize that we've got a government that has been taken over by the globalists. You know, we don't have... What did President Carter say last summer? Do we no longer have a functional government of the United States? I mean, this is a former president of the United States says that we no longer have a functional government. I mean, that's a pretty strong statement to make. And, you know, and the reality is he's absolutely right. I mean, we have been completely taken over by special interest groups. The Federal Reserve Bank, they can do whatever they want to do. They started doing that in 1913. They contracted the M1 money supply. You know, it's so funny. They contracted the M1 money supply in 1929, causing the Great Depression. And in 2008, they massively increased the M1 money supply. And I'll never forget, I had a meeting with George Bush Jr., at the local college a couple of years ago, and I was talking to him about the M1 money supply. And I looked at him and I said, I want to thank you so much. And he goes, what for? And I said, I want to thank you for increasing the M1 money supply in 2008. Had you not done that, we basically would have had a total financial collapse. And, you know, Doug, I don't even know if you knew what I was talking about. He just kind of looked at me. Yeah, he just kind of looked at me. Oh, my God. And you know, I don't know. I mean, the conversation didn't go very far from there. And but it was just interesting to me that I thought, you know, and I had dinner with his father. I knew his dad real well, President Bush Sr., the CIA boy, and I did a bunch of seminars with him. I probably did 60 seminars with him and his wife. And I got, you know, we're always backstage talking to him and hanging out with him. And the crazy thing about it is, when you meet these people and you're basically doing seminars and stuff with them, they're really, really, really nice. There were only 2 people on the seminar circuit that were really, really mean, and everybody else was really, really nice. And one of them was a TV evangelist.
Really?
I thought you'd get a kick. Yeah, oh yeah. And that was I'll tell you his name. That was Robert Schuller. He was unbelievably mean. And wow. You know, that was about the same year where he slapped that flight attendant and had that huge lawsuit against him when he was on the seminar circuit with us back then.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah, I remember that.
That boy, that boy is mean. He is mean.
Well, do you care to disclose who the other individual you consider mean? Just curious.
Yeah, that was Bill Cosby.
Really?
Unbelievably mean. Oh God, are you kidding me? Oh, this is crazy. Let me tell you the story with Bill. I'll tell you the whole story. Let me tell you stories. Let me tell you. Since we're doing this little thing tonight, we're telling the whole world globalist stories. I'll tell you my little two. I've got so many of these I can tell you. I can tell you about what we talked about the night we had dinner with Benjamin Netanyahu, but that's another story. Let me start off with Robert Schuller. So we're sitting there. We're at the Green Bay Airport. I don't know if you've ever been to Green Bay, Wisconsin. If you got any listeners in Green Bay, Wisconsin, you know I'm telling the truth. It's just the way it is. You go to the airport, there's no taxis. Okay. Well, I'm at the seminar. We're going to have, I think we got 16 or 18,000 people coming to this amphitheater in Green Bay, and you know Robert Schuller's there. I'm there. I think President Bush is there. I don't remember anymore. It's been so many years ago. It's back in the 90s, and so we had to call a taxi because they didn't send a car to pick us up because, you know, we had my son with me, my 10-year-old or 9-year-old or however he was then, and he was basically sitting. So we're sitting outside of the airport, okay, and we're sitting on our luggage, and we're having to wait for like an hour for the taxi to show up. And about that time, the limousine that's picking up Robert Schuller shows up. And Lana Powell was the liaison then for the organization who we were working for. She's a great lady. And she comes walking, climbs out of this big old, this is like a triple stretch limo. It held like 14 people. And so I looked at Lana and I said, Lana, I said, do you mind if we ride with you guys to the hotel since this is your limo? And she goes, well, this is Robert Schuler's limo. And I said, she goes, I have to ask him if you and your son and your wife can ride with us to the hotel, which is the same hotel. You know what he told us? No.
He
told us no.
No.
And we stood up. I remember I wanted to speak. He looked at me and no. And he got in his limo and they drove away. And we left us sitting on our suitcases at the airport.
Oh my word.
Kid you not. So I have no. And now Bill Cosby. Now Bill Cosby was interesting. He was in Philadelphia with us, and now Bill, I liked Bill, but he was really mean to the staff. And what happened is they were supposed to pick him up in his neighborhood in this limo to come speak at the seminar. And at the last minute, he changed the plans and wanted to take the train into town, into Philadelphia, and wanted them to pick up on the train at the train terminal. Well, he got to the train terminal, and they missed the train pickup. They weren't at the right tracks. And what happened is he's Bill Cosby, so you already know what happened. He gets besieged with people wanting autographs, right? So they've got to go rescue him. So he's unbelievably angry that the staff had messed up the pickup that he had changed at the last minute. So he gets to the seminar, and it was the funniest thing. He was so angry because he had gotten besieged by all these fans. And so he ends up coming and speaking for us at the breakfast luncheon, or the breakfast buffet thing they had before the seminar started. And I was with him, and they introduced me as one of the fellow speakers. And he was sitting there, and then they took me aside, and they said, well, can you talk to Mr. Cosby? And I said, well, what's wrong? And she goes, well, he just cussed out Lori, who's like 6 months pregnant, in the limo because she messed up the pickup. And he cussed her up and down a blue streak, and if she didn't want to hear her baby, if her baby didn't want to hear these cuss words, basically, she needed to get out of the limo. And I said, really? I said, that's pretty bad. And so basically he's talking, and so he did this breakfast thing. So about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I was scheduled to speak right after him, so I got there a little bit early, and I brought my briefcase, and I thought, well, I'll take a couple of pictures of me and Mr. Cosby because he hasn't been mean to me. So I walked in there, and he goes, I pulled the camera out, and he looked at me, he goes, what are you doing with the camera? And I said, well, I was going to take a picture of you. He goes, well, who do you think you are? I said, well, I'm one of the other speakers with you. I'm following you today. And he goes, and I looked at him, I said, but you're in such a foul mood, Mr. Cosby. I said, I'll be honest with you, I don't even want any photos with you. I said, yeah, I've been a fan of yours for a long, long time, and I didn't realize you were just so gruff and angry. And I said, so I'm just going to put my camera away. And it was so funny. He looked at me, Doug, and started laughing. And he got so nice. He goes, sit down, let's take some pictures. And I'm looking at a picture of me and him right now on my wall in my office. But he was so nice to me. But he was so rough with the staff that it messed up. He's very intolerant of mistakes. But I tell you one thing about him, though. He had the nicest suit of clothes on of any speaker I've ever seen. I bet his clothes were $25,000, just his suit and his ties.
Man.
And then it was so funny.
Wow. To me,
this is funny. And then he has this huge cigar, right? And it's literally a foot long. And he tells me, he goes, oh, by the way, he goes, I've got to go do my speech now, and so I don't want anybody taking any cigars. My cigars, you make sure my cigar is here when I get back. And I looked at him, I started laughing. I said, am I now the keeper of the Bill Cosby cigar? It was so funny, Doug. But I can tell you story after story after story of all that stuff. It was just funny.
Well, it amazes me. Somebody like Bill Cosby, the fans made him who he is, essentially. I mean, the fans are responsible for his success. He's got a suit of clothes that probably I could never afford, or no normal person could afford. And yet he's got this foul mood, this attitude of entitlement, or this attitude of I'm better than you. But I've got to admit though, they told me, they said they had asked me if I'd watch him because I got along so well with him. Because I didn't take a lot of his gruff. I just gave it back to him. And after I did that, he was really, really nice to me. But you're absolutely right. It was an interesting experience for me too. After I found out how he had talked to Lori, it was pretty bad. Yeah, that's Mr. American Family Man too. My goodness, and Robert Schuler too. I hate that. I'd never share my 14 passenger limousine with anyone. Doggone it. Now General Schwarzkopf, he was the real deal. He was one of the nicest people I've ever met. And he's died now of Alzheimer's, probably from the Gulf War injections that he got, and he's gone now.
And Colin Powell was incredibly nice, and of course the George Bush Jr. White House threw him under the bus in front of the UN and in front of the United States. Mary Lou Retton was really, really nice. Paul Harvey was a gem. Larry King was incredibly nice. I mean, he was one of the nicest people I've ever met. And so there were a lot of really nice people on that seminar circuit. We had a lot of good times with them, and the reality is that nobody was really on bad behavior except for a couple of times. And then one other guy was that I don't remember his name, so I don't want to tell you the story on him. But it was interesting, and so we got a kick out of all that. But I did that for many years. Did almost 100 shows with them. Spoke to 1 million people at live seminars, and
wow.
It was featured on thousands of talk shows back then. And so basically I decided that it was time to come out of retirement at almost the age of 60 and get back on the circuit again and start doing what I know to do and tell the people the truth this time. And not because
wow.
I'm trying to sell a book, because I'll be honest with everybody who's listening today. If you don't want to buy my book, don't buy it. You can go to my website and you can sign up for my emails. You're going to get a lot of the same information. You won't get all of it because the book is really up to date. But the reality is I don't care if you buy a book from me or not. If you don't have the money, you just want to get free information from me, that's okay too. I don't care. My thing here is this. And I hope you hear my heart on this. I want everybody to realize that I'm telling everybody the truth that I'm talking to tonight. I'm telling them the truth of what I've seen and what I've experienced, the chemistry that I've done, the patients that I've worked with, the people that I've helped, the globalists that I know, the God that I love, the Jesus that saved me, and I want them to know that I'm telling them from my heart tonight who I am and what I am. And I've never discussed a lot of this stuff ever on any other show that I've ever done, including George Norrie the other night. We didn't talk about the Nephilim in the book of Enoch and the blood and how it sanctifies you and how it protects you against these demons when your soul's on its journey to heaven. We never talked about any of that. And if that by itself doesn't get you to be saved, I don't know what else to say to you.
Amen. Amen. Doctor, we're a little bit late for the break. I've got a whole lot of questions from a whole lot of listeners all across the globe.
I'm sorry. I ran long, Doug. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. Well worth the time. When we come back, I just want to pepper you with several questions, or quite a few questions here, and I've got a couple of questions of my own. By the way, you look fabulous for 58 years old. You look. I really thought you were younger than I am.
Well, thank you. I'll send you a check later for that comment.
well, I'm telling you, man. Seriously.
Now, my wife in that picture. My wife is 57.
See, I mean, folks, the proof is in the picture. It's. You could tell you exude health. I mean, you're a picture of health as far as I'm concerned. Look at a picture of me, and I'm I got one foot in the grave.
Don't speak that.
Well, you're right, folks. We're going to be right back after these brief messages. We are talking with Dr. Ted Brower.
Gentlemen, to the third and final half hour, or actually 40 minutes, as we took a late break last hour with Dr. Breuer. I'm sorry, Dr. Breuer, who is an international...
You okay?
Yes, I'm all right.
More NyQuil?
No NyQuil. I am coming off a cold. That is, thank goodness, it is. Today was going to be the last day because it was a rough day Friday, and then yesterday and today were pretty rough. Today's been the best day, and I feel it dissipating. When you feel the sickness leaving you and you start to feel more energy and feel better, feels like what I'm going through now, just like on Friday when I was getting hit with the worst of it during the show, and I just felt like I wanted to go to sleep. But anyway, you have an important question, Dad.
Well, yeah. Well, I have to ask Dr. Ted Brower if he ever gets colds. But I'm going to save that question. We have a listener here, Doctor, that has a pretty important question here, and I don't know what's behind this. In other words, I don't know what the underlying problem might be, but this is for Carrie, who's listening live. She writes that it's amazing. You're an amazing guest, by the way. Her blood pressure is sky high today, and she says, I'm scared. What do you suggest? I don't want.
That's easy. Blood pressure is easy. Okay, number one, she probably needs to lose some weight. That's number one. Number two, if she doesn't need to lose any weight, you can. We've got a real good product on the website. It's called HGH Stimulate, and what it does, it helps to naturally lower blood pressure. Also, beet powder will also do the same thing. Organic beet powder crystals. We've got that on the website. Plus, magnesium is excellent for helping to lower blood pressure, and also niacin in many cases can help lower blood pressure. So if you go on a stack of like the HGH Stimulate, the beet powder, the powder crystals, niacin and the magnesium. In almost every single case, you'll lower the blood pressure. Now, the best type of exercise for getting rid of lowering blood pressure is to get one of those little mini trampolines like the cheerleaders use on the side of the fields for the NFL. And what you do is it's like 3 feet across, and if you can't balance on one, get a chair and hold on both sides. Make sure you check with your doctor before you start doing any exercise, and basically start jogging very lightly, just 10, 15 seconds the first day, 30, 40 seconds the second day, gradually build up to doing about 5 to 10 minutes a day. And what will happen is that is the absolute best exercise for lowering blood pressure. I've never seen anything work better than that as far as exercise. And you stack it with the supplements, and your blood pressure should be doing very, very well within 30 days. Is
there anything? Oh, okay. I'm the way I'm reading this is that her blood pressure is very high today. She's scared. She's about ready to go to the ER. Is there any quick fix or anything that she could do to lower it?
Not really, because they're not something, because of the supplements you have to order those. No, not really. The best thing to do is to make sure you reduce the amount of sodium in the diet. In many cases, that'll elevate blood pressure too. Sodium is interesting. You should never, ever be using table salt, the white chlorinated sugar, or salt. You should never use that ever. You should only be using like Redmond salt or Himalayan salt that's been mined deep into in the earth. And the reason for that is the drying ponds, when they're drying this salt, everything's being exposed to chemtrails and aluminum. And you get these high levels of aluminum in the salt, and then plus they also add aluminum triskylate in those types of salt as an anti-caking agent. Plus, people are cooking in aluminum pots and pans. They're using aluminum foil. They're using antiperspirant deodorants, and they're getting all of this exposure to aluminum, all this exogenous exposure to aluminum. On top of that, now they're getting the chemtrails. Plus, there's also aluminum in the immunizations and the shots. And so you've got to get all of this stuff back out of your diet. And also, you've got to make sure your weight's down. My blood pressure usually stays around 105/60, but mine stays but I exercise every day. And, so okay. I make sure my blood pressure stays down. But, see, the problem is, again, usually blood pressure is not just because somebody takes care of themselves. Most of the time it's not taking care of yourself that elevates the blood pressure. And basically, if she's having really elevated blood pressure, she may be right. She may need to go to the emergency room and get it reduced. And a lot of times they'll give you an IV with magnesium to help dilate blood vessels and relax muscles, and that'll help bring the blood pressure down immediately. But that's just a panacea. That doesn't fix anything. Same thing with blood pressure medicine. I mean, you don't have a deficiency of blood pressure medicine. That's not why you have high blood pressure. You don't have a deficiency of aspirin. That's not why you have a problem with headaches. Same thing with NyQuil. NyQuil is one of the worst products that you can possibly take. They warn you with Tylenol, with acetaminophen, that's one of the primary causes of liver failure in the United States. If you go out and get drunk one night and then take a handful of Tylenol when you go to bed that night, chances are 3 days later you're going to need a liver transplant. Number one cause of liver failure and transplant is Tylenol. And they warn you on the label of Tylenol not to mix with alcohol, but yet they mix Tylenol and alcohol together in NyQuil. And they warn you of potential liver damage if you overexceed it. I mean, crazy.
Wow.
I didn't think of that. You'd be better off. Listen, if you're an alcoholic, don't do this, okay? Or if you've got alcoholic syndrome or whatever and you're scared of becoming an alcoholic. But you're better off to take some Jack Daniel's whiskey if you're really sick, put a little bit of honey in it, take a little bit of echinacea with it, and basically just take a shot of Jack Daniel's and go sleep it off for the night instead of taking NyQuil. And if you have to have an analgesic, take some aspirin. That's okay. But remember, taking aspirin every day, aspirin is an extremely good blood thinner. The problem is it's too good, and it causes a condition of wet macular degeneration. It causes the blood vessels in the back of the eye to start bleeding, and it can actually detach the retina and cause macular degeneration. So it's one of the causes of blindness. Now we've got an entire country taking aspirin every day, and we've got all this macular degeneration happening. You should never take aspirin every day, but it is a phenomenal blood thinner. And if you've got a problem with your heart, you should always keep a little bit of aspirin beside your bed. And if you start feeling chest pains or whatever, you can chew up an aspirin, or if you have a heart attack, it'll actually, in some cases, reduce the symptoms of the heart attack because it thins the blood so quickly. But be very careful with aspirin because you can definitely overdo it, and I don't think you should do it every day. There's natural types of blood thinners that you can take, including cod liver oil, including vitamin E, and drinking enough water. The biggest problem we have in this country right now as far as water consumption is we don't drink enough, and then when we do drink it, we're drinking out of plastic bottles with bisphenol A. And one thing, I heard your commercial. I wrote a really good email you can read for free on my website, and it's should Americans and should Christians store food? Everybody listen to me in the sound of my voice. You should have at least a 30 to 90 day supply of food available in your house at all times. That's critical. And I promote people that sell organic food and deep freeze dried food. I like to freeze dry 25-year stuff, so you don't have to worry about it expiring on you, because you need to realize that. I mean, everybody's talking about the rapture. Oh, we're going to get raptured. We're going to be pulled out of here. Well, quite frankly, I hope we get raptured. Okay, I don't think it's going to happen, but I hope we do. I mean, if we get to go up in the first load, I'll be all the happier about the whole thing. Somebody else can eat my beans and rice. Okay, but here's the deal. What we have to understand is that when my mom was in Germany, everybody was starving to death after World War I and after World War II. There was no rapture. When the Christians were marched into the Colosseums to be fed to the lions, there was no rapture. When the apostles were all basically killed, there was no rapture. I mean, when the bubonic plague happened and the half of Europe died from the Black Death, there was no rapture. I mean, my gosh, if half the population of Europe dies within a few years of the bubonic plague, the Black Death that swept across Europe, there was no rapture. They weren't even teaching rapture. The rapture theory didn't get started until the mid-1800s. You need to do the research on that. No one ever taught that until then. And the reality is, I hope we have a rapture. I hope we have a mid-tribulation rapture. I hope we don't have to go through any of it. But the reality is, what if we have to go through it? I mean, I'm not talking about the book of Revelation being open here. I'm talking about a financial collapse caused by our government and the Federal Reserve Bank, or the start of a third world war, and we have a shortage of food supplies. That's what we're talking about, and that's what everybody needs to keep in mind. Everybody needs to have sure they have enough food for themselves and for their families, because if they don't, who's supposed to feed them, Doug? The churches are going to run out of money of food in the food banks immediately. And so everybody needs to have a supply of food, and that's why I promote that. In fact, we tell people that all the time. So if you've got friends who don't want to believe you about that, send them just cut and paste that email that I wrote on that and send it to them. We cover all of this stuff in detail. We talk about what happened with when the B-17s and the P-51s are flying over Germany, killing all my relatives. I guarantee you they didn't think it was going to get much worse than that. Okay? And when Dresden was firebombed and 100,000 women and children were killed in one night for being firebombed in Dresden, right before the war was over, there was no reason, there wasn't a military target except to kill women and children. I'm sure they couldn't think it was going to be any worse than that. But the point is, I mean, things happen. The human beings in this country and in the world are not considered, that we're considered soulless creature by these global elites. And you know what's also interesting? I want to tell you this, Doug. Tom Horn talks about transhumanism and the melding of human beings with machines, and how these elites are planning on never dying. They're going to be augmented, and they're going to transfer their souls, their spirits, whatever they want to transfer in to these machines so they can live forever. You know why there's just a huge push for that right now? Let me tell you why. This is my theory on that. These boys know they made a pact with Lucifer, and they know they're getting old, and they know they're going to be up. They know what happens when they die. And they don't want to die. They're scared to death to die. See, Jesus tells us when we become Christians, he says, "Death, O death, where is thy sting? Where is thy victory?" Paul tells us that in the epistles. And the reality is this: we don't have the fear of death because we have the blood of Christ that sanctifies us and protects us after we're dead and after our spirit and soul goes to heaven. These people that are these elites, they don't believe in all that. They know they've made that pact with Lucifer, and they don't want to die. They're scared to death of dying, Doug, and they were afraid. That's why they're trying to meld their bodies and themselves with machines so they don't have to die. That's what the transhuman movement is all about, because they want to basically turn us into insects to be their servants and only allow us to breed when they want us to breed, and then they're going to be basically ruling the planet. It's the nuttiest thing I've ever read, but if you read the book of Revelation, it all ties together. No,
it does. It absolutely does.
Yeah,
it's phenomenal.
But I'm sorry I digressed on that, but I wanted to cover that thing with the storing of food. Everybody needs to have enough food stored for them and their families for 30 to 60 days. Freeze dry is the best. And make sure you have a water filtration system that's passive fed in case the power goes out. So you can make sure you've got a source of water that you can get fresh water, because that'll be the first thing that people will be looking for is water in the event that we have a global catastrophe like an EMP or something else. Oh, let me ask you a question, Doug. Alex Jones released last summer, when the guy from South Carolina Lindsey Graham said that the South Carolina, Charleston Harbor, was under the threat of a nuclear attack, and then Alex Jones released that those nuclear weapons had disappeared from that base in Texas. Did they really detonate a nuclear bomb off the coast of off the Atlantic coast back after that happened?
Boy,
or do you know, or is this a theory?
I've asked a number of people about that, and I've got different answers from different people. Bottom line is, I don't know. The simple answer. Here's what I do know. I do know that there are missing nuclear weapons. I do know that.
We know, yeah, we know that.
If I had to guess, well, I'm not going to guess. I just don't know, and I would like to find out. But it was an awful weird exchange, wasn't it?
It was weird. And then Putin coming out and saying that a detonation had occurred, in the Atlantic Ocean off the coast there. I'm like, this is very odd. And that one lady who was with the World Bank, I forgot her name, she came out on video and said that basically that happened, and she gave the name of the admiral who did it and everything else, and now he was terminated. And now we fired 200 or so of the top brass in the military under this Obama administration, and it's just crazy, including the guys in charge of the nuclear arsenal. I mean, we know that's all true. So, I mean, something happened to shake that whole thing up.
Sorry about that, Doctor. Joe is yanking on my arm here.
That's okay. We've got a bunch more questions. Let's go back to our questions.
Well, okay. One question I have, in fact, two others, Sherry and Rob asked me this, and I've got this question as well. The prevalence of Alzheimer's, can that be reversed or stopped?
Yes. Now, everybody listen to me for a second about Alzheimer's disease. This is a heinous disease. I mean, this is one of those diseases that, it got founded in hell. Hell didn't want it. They punched a hole in hell and shoved it up on us. They said, we don't want it down here. This is too bad. Alzheimer's is that bad, okay? It's unbelievably bad. Now, the autopsy showed there's a neural entanglement and there's abnormally high levels of aluminum in some Alzheimer's patients and all that. I personally think, now everybody listen to me on this one because this is my theory on this and my opinion on this. I think one of the primary causes of Alzheimer's disease, other than immunizations, which I believe immunizations massively increase the risks of senile dementia, but that doesn't necessarily have to be Alzheimer's disease, okay, because of the aluminum. But I think, and the mercury and the shots, I think the number one cause that's causing this huge, literally epidemic proportion of Alzheimer's disease are statin drugs. I think the statin drugs turn the brain to such mush and the cholesterol gets lowered so low that the brain can't function properly. And I've seen a lot of folks who've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. They're using coconut oil and they're being put like on an egg diet, including the egg yolks, to bring their cholesterol back up, and they seem to be getting some good results from doing that. Statin drugs should never be used. They should, again, in my book, Breakthrough Health, I list 10 drugs that should never be used. Like we talked about Tylenol a few minutes ago, statin drugs are one of those. Sleeping pills is another one of those. There's certain drugs you just have to stay away from because of what it does to the brain. And I think that statin drugs are one of the primary causes of Alzheimer's disease, Doug, and they should never be put into a body, and they should be pulled off the shelf by the Food and Drug Administration. I mean, they cause skeletal muscle necrosis. They cause kidney failure. They cause, the list just goes on and on and on and on and on. There's literally hundreds of side effects of statin drugs, including cancer, which we mentioned about earlier. And they've never been proven in any clinical study that wasn't paid for by these manufacturers to reduce the risks of heart disease. Not one time. And cholesterol is not the primary culprit in heart disease. It's the inflammation, and it's all of these chemical compounds that we're putting into our bodies. They're causing all of this inflammation and these precursors that we're putting into our bodies. And if we don't stop putting all these poisons into our bodies, we're not going to get rid of the problems with the senile dementia. I mean, you can't be eating GMO foods and causing celiac disease and all these other conditions and not have problems with senile dementia. You can't be giving kids 60 immunizations with all this mercury and all these chemicals and all that thimerosal and all that squalene if they're thimerosal free and all those adjuvants and not be causing problems. And again, I'm going to repeat this, with adults, 3 flu shots increase the risks of senile dementia by up to 50%. That's according to Dr. Russell Blaylock, who's one of the top brain surgeons in the world, for heaven's sakes. And I mean, he warns everybody to stay away from immunizations and also to stay away from statin drugs. And I do the same thing. You've got to stay away from the statins. And I think the statin drugs, the lowered cholesterol, the lack of the right nutrients and the right fats in the diet, including the eggs, are causing one of the primary cause of Alzheimer's disease.
Fantastic. I've got Dan D. listening live from Nebraska, wants to know, what do you eat? What do you eat in terms of, what's your normal diet?
Okay, when you go to the 10foods.com website, there's an Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy program there. Okay, that's a 6 CD set. It has a book called Maximum Age Reversal. You get the book Breakthrough Health for free, and you get a cookbook in there that we have along with the 6 CDs plus reports on high blood pressure, depression, diabetes, cancer, ADD, autism, all of that stuff in that CD set. It's like a home study course of what to do to change your own diet and your own health. It's like $100, okay? It's phenomenal value for what you get for it. And what it does, it lays out our diet. Now, if you came to my house tomorrow night and you want to have dinner with me, I'd have my wife make you an organic Cornish game hen on a bed of wild rice, probably with broccoli or asparagus, and some type of sweet potato casserole. I mean, you would think that you'd have basically gone to heaven when you eat here. The food is that good, and it tastes that good. You don't have to eat broccoli nut surprise that tastes like cardboard to think you got to be healthy. You don't have to eat like that, Doug. You can have really good tasting food every single day and have tremendous energy and output. The days of eating tofu, which is a soy product, are gone. They're over with. You don't have to eat like that to be healthy. I won't eat like that. And so all the recipes in that cookbook are taste tested. Every morning I get up and I have a protein drink for breakfast when I get out of bed. First thing in the morning I have 2 purple sticks, okay? The purple sticks are a green tea extract. It's for my coffee days. And I'd have 2 purple sticks. That boots up my brain, but I haven't had any of those now since this morning, like at 6 o'clock. So I'm off of that, and I have no caffeine in me at all tonight. And so what ends up happening is then I wait about 30 minutes, and I have my prayer time with my wife. That's when we pray out loud, audibly together, and about a third of the time we bring our children who are 11, 13, and 15 into the room with us, and we teach them how to pray. The problem is nobody knows how to pray. Everybody wants to nobody understands how to pray. And so we pray, and we pray correctly. And we teach the kids how to pray correctly. Then I go in and I make my protein shake first thing in the morning with my protein powders, and that's my breakfast. And I don't want a big breakfast because I end up having to work out right after that. We train first thing in the morning. We have a gym here at the house, and then we get done working out. We go back in the kitchen, and I'll have a really big omelet. Usually it's a 4-egg omelet. My wife will put like fresh spinach in it or something like that, and we'll either cook it in butter or we'll cook it in coconut oil, because coconut oil is exceptionally good for brain chemistry. And so a lot of times the coconut oil is actually healthier for you. In fact, this afternoon I actually took a couple tablespoons of coconut oil. I mixed it with a little bit of cranberry juice, and that doesn't taste great, but it's really, really good for your brain, and it really boosts up your brain and your mental acuity. And I wanted to do it because I knew I was going to be on your show tonight. But the coconut oil is one of the best brain foods you can eat. And so, and then for lunch we'll have. We just eat really healthy food. That's what. So don't trust me. Everybody, when we go, it's so funny, Doug. We talk about the top 10 foods never to eat. Beef, eggs, and butter aren't even included on my top 10 list.
Interesting. Well,
I mean, we eat beef on a regular basis. I mean, you've got to have cholesterol in your diet if you want to make testosterone. If you want to keep acting like a man and have energy, you've got to have that. I mean, a few months ago, back in January, we went to Pasadena to the Florida State game for the national championship, because I've never been to a national championship game, because Florida State hasn't been to a game like that since I think 2000. And so what happened is we were playing for the national championship. So I told my wife, I said, I'm going to spend the money and I'm going to go out to Pasadena. And what I did is I really loaded up with iodine and vitamin C before I went out there to make sure that my immune system was super, super strong, because iodine helps to do that. We got out there. I could not believe how heavy the chemtrails were over the stadium that day. And the craziest thing is I started pointing the chemtrails out to everybody. I said, look at this. And they're looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Those are contrails. I said, those are not contrails. They're spraying them over the stadium. Well, by the time we left there, almost everybody that we were with, except for myself because of all the iodine that I was taking, were sick as a dog. I mean, sick as a dog. My son got deathly ill, started coughing up blood. My friend from college that I went with, Steve, he got deathly ill, lost his voice for 3 weeks. I don't know what in the world, if they sprayed us with something, who in the world knows? All I know is that everybody that we were with, probably 2/3 of us, got sick. And the nuttiest thing is, look at all these people that are young now. Your son just said that a few minutes ago, that when he went to the doctor, they said this particular type of flu is targeting guys your age, 30-year-olds. And it's almost like they know how to target people at a certain age group with the stuff that they're releasing into the environment. And you say, well, I don't want to believe all that. Well, neither do I. I can't prove that. But the point is, it sure seems weird to me. And that's why I tested the water from the chemtrails or from my rainwater. I mean, I suggest everybody does that. If I knew how to test for biologicals, I would do that too. I mean, I don't know how to do that. I wasn't trained in that, but I sure can test for chemicals. But I don't know how to test for biologicals. I don't even know where to send the biologicals to. And let's talk about Morgellons disease for a second. That's a whole other bag of snakes that nobody's talking about. And these psychiatrists are saying these people have these Morgellon fibers coming out of their body, that they're psychiatric patients and they're mentally ill. Are you kidding me? They're pulling fibers out of their skin that can't be identified with these different types of scopes and compounds when they analyze them. And then they find out these fibers, when you hit them with a certain frequency, they start budding and growing. Are you kidding me? And they're saying, this was on a TV show again on the History Channel. I mean, this is insane what's going on with Morgellons disease and how that's affecting everybody. And is that a product of the chemtrails, Doug? I have no idea. It sure seems like they could be, but it sure is coming from somewhere. And the sad part about it is, what are we supposed to do about that? Keep your immune system strong. Keep the iodine in your system. Keep the vitamin C in your system. Keep the antioxidants in your system, the vitamin A, the E, the C, the selenium, the iodine. Keep it all in your system in high concentrations. Massively increase your energy levels, and will also massively increase your immune system and keep you strong in the advent of that. In fact, I just wrote another paper that you get online for free at healthmasters.com. It's on the flu shot. Just finished writing it. When I finished writing it, was like, oh God, I think it was like 10 pages long. It took me weeks to put it together. You can read that one for free too on the website. But and also, if you want to call the office tomorrow, I'll do this for a couple of days. I can't do it all the time. And if you don't have the money for the book, the $25 for the book, if you just want to pay the shipping on it, which is like $8, and we send it out to you priority mail, just call the office up at 1-800-726-1834 if you really don't have the money to pay for it, and I'll be happy to send you a book out for the $8. I can't do any more than that, Doug.
Well,
I don't know what else to do.
That's a fantastic deal.
Well, it's for shipping now. Now, if you got to move your money around different bank accounts because you have so much money, don't call me up and try to get an $8 book, please. Just get a book. But I mean, this is for people that seriously who don't have the money. You can call. You can't do that on the website. And my son's going to fuss at me because I just did this on the radio show. But if you want to do that and you really are that broke and you can spend $8 for the book, call us up and I'll be happy to send you a book for that. And because I don't know how else to tell the people that I'm here to help. I want to help them as best I can. The globalists who are running the planet want us into a one-world government. They want us into a Luciferian state. They want all the money to go back through the Bank of England and back through the Jesuits, and that's where all the stuff is going through. That's how it's all happening. And if you don't see it, then you've got to read more. You've got to open your eyes. There's a bunch of good books that you can read. The Rise of the Fourth Reich by Jim Marrs, we talked about that. Stan Monteith, I was on his show last week. He wrote an excellent book called The Brotherhood of Darkness. Apollyon Rising, Thomas Horn, excellent book. The Unseen Hand, Epperson, that's a classic. The Holographic Universe, that's another classic. There are all kinds of great books that you can get and you can read and start learning what's going on and start learning about your health. I've got a plethora of books that are used on Amazon, for heaven's sakes. They're not my books. People are selling the used copies. It's not the new book, but it's the old books. You can get those copies of those books for hardly anything and learn what I'm teaching you. Learn how to stay healthy. And remember, your health is your most valuable asset. I've never heard anybody say who was dying of cancer, I wish I'd have spent more time at the office. They're saying, gosh, I wish I'd have taken better care of myself. And see, that's what we have to understand, is that our health is something that's given to us as standard equipment in most cases. And if we take care of it, it'll last us an entire lifetime. But if we constantly abuse it and do everything that we can to destroy it, we can destroy it. We can lose our health pretty quickly. And then you'll spend every penny you've got trying to get your health back. And it's not necessary to do that. You don't have to do what I did when I was in graduate school at Florida State, 2 years out of graduate school, when I came down with heart disease because I was pushing myself, doing 100-hour work weeks because I didn't know how to say no, and I was push, and I almost died of heart disease. You don't have to experience that. I'll show you how to avoid doing all that and how to stay healthy. But the thing is, you've got to take the first step, and you've got to realize that your health is important. I mean, another thing I want to share with the listeners, I've never heard anybody say on their deathbed, as they're dying, I wish I'd have spent more time at the office, more time at work. It's always, I wish I'd have spent more time with my family. Learn to budget your time. Listen to me, friends. We're only here for a little bit. This is just a practice session for us. Okay? We're spiritual beings experiencing a physical existence basically in a holographic universe made out of sound. Okay? We're only going to be here for a short period of time, and then we get to be with God for all of eternity as long as we're saved through Christ Jesus. So the reality is this. Don't spend your whole life in pursuit of stuff. Don't buy stuff you don't need with money you don't have to impress people you don't know. Don't do that. Learn to realize that your family and your relationships and the relationship you have with God and with Christ are the most important. Learn to pray out loud, and don't pray in the negative. Say, God, I don't want you to kill me today. Don't say that. Don't say that. Say, God, I want you to bless me today. I want you to send me in the right place. Put me in the right place at the right time every time, Father. My footsteps are ordered by you. I commit my plans into you, and they will succeed, Father, because I am bought at a price, and I'm in covenant with you, Christ Jesus, and I stand before God Almighty today, and I say, Lord, I thank you for the covenant blessings that you pour upon me, and I thank you for the relationship that I have through God through Christ Jesus. And speak the words that are not as if they were. Speak the words that are positive. Don't speak in the negative. Don't let me die of sickness and disease. No, dear Lord, keep me healthy today. Keep me healthy today. Keep my brain healthy. Keep my blood vessels healthy. Keep my liver healthy. Let me speak the things that are not. Every time you say something, Doug, because I know we're almost out of time, and everybody listen to me for a second. When you say anything about yourself or your family, put a comma at the last word and say at the end of that sentence, and that's the way I want it to be. Because you're speaking it into existence. That's the way I want it to be. I could do all things through Christ who strengthens me, comma, and that's the way I want it to be. My health is incredible. I feel great every single day of my life, and comma, and that's the way I want it to be. I'm always at the right time, the right place every single day, comma, and that's the way I want it to be. If you start saying, and that's the way I want it to be with every sentence that you say, you'll learn to shut your mouth quick and be careful of the words that come out of your mouth, because we are made out of sound, and we change the fabric of space-time by the confessions that come out of our mouth. There you go, Doug. You got me all riled up. But it's the truth. I've studied this stuff for years. I mean, we literally live in a holographic universe, according to Chuck Missler, and it's the truth. We do. God, and people say, well, why did God do that? Why did he put us in a holographic universe made of sound? Because he wanted you to know that what you speak about, you bring about, that the power of life and death is in the tongue. He told you why he did it in the Word. The only thing that's real in this universe that we live in is our souls. Satan's group, they don't care about your money. They don't care about your stuff. They care about your souls. This isn't a battle for men's money. They already have all the money. This is a battle for men's souls. And as soon as we understand that this is a spiritual battle and we need to stay in the fight as long as we possibly can, as healthy as we possibly can, and we need to speak the things that are not as if they were, we'll learn very, very quickly when you say, and that's the way I want it to be, with everything that comes out of your mouth when it comes to you and your family, to quit cursing your own family and saying bad things about it. You say, Aunt Jenny, she's always sick. There's always something wrong with her. And that's the way I want it to be. Well, why would you say that?
That's true.
So don't talk like that. You can't speak those words over people you care about. And Jenny is being healed by the grace of God, and that's the way I want it to be. That sounds better. But see, learn to speak in the positive. Learn to pray in the positive. That's the biggest mistake that people do when they pray. God, please don't let somebody kill me today. What the heck is that supposed to mean? How's God supposed to respond to that? Don't let somebody kill me today? Are you kidding me? And that's the way I want it to be? No. God, thank you, Lord, for taking care of me today and protecting me. I stationed angels about me, Lord. I placed a hedge of thorns about me. I covered me and my family with the blood of Christ. And that's the way I want it to be. Does that make more sense to you, Doug?
It sure does. Amen to that. Doctor, in the waning moments here that we have of our show, I can't believe the 3 hours went so quickly. Tell our listeners once again your book, your website, how to contact you. Just give it all out there.
Website, healthmasters.com or 10foods.com. You have to spell the 10 out, TEN, foods.com. That gets you the HGH stimulate, which is the natural alternative to Viagra. It also helps lower blood pressure. It also it's a phenomenal product as far as when you work out, it increases lean muscle weight and helps to burn body fat. Also, that has the Eat, Drink, and Be Healthy program there and the book there. That's 10foods.com. The healthmasters.com has everything, all of my blogs, all of the reports that I've written. It has also the information on the new book. It also has the article that's not in the book on the flu vaccine that I just finished. You can look that one up. Plus, it also has a really good article in there that says that soy turned little boys into little girls. You need to read that one. And also the other article that I just read to you a few minutes ago about what happened, or that I told you about what happens in when a woman is has a baby in her and the baby is in utero, and what happens to that baby if it's exposed to exogenous estrogen. That's in there. That new article's in there. So there's a lot of stuff that you can read online for free. And again, support us the best you can. You know, we're here. We're self-funded. We're doing everything we can to promote the truth of the Word of God and the health of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the three-dimensional lifestyle that we're all supposed to be following. And I'm awake, obviously. I'm a patriot, obviously, and support the Hagmann and Hagmann show, and support the sponsors of this show. Send out the blogs, the podcasts, send out forwards to all of your emails, and help everybody who's in this together, who's standing firm against tyranny, who doesn't want us to become part of the Third Reich, to stand against it. It's so horrible. A few months ago, I was at the airport, and I was being groped again, and by the TSA because I refused to be X-rayed. And I looked at the guy, and I looked at him, and he was groping me. And I said to him, it's 1937. He looked at me and goes, what? I said, I'm standing on the cobblestone streets of Berlin. He goes, what are you talking about? And I said, I hear the stormtroopers marching down the cobblestone streets of Berlin right now, and it's 1937. He goes, dude, are you okay? And I said, yeah. He goes, what does that mean? Or what are you trying to say? So I told him again. He goes, I have no idea what you're even talking about. And I said, that's obvious. And I thought to myself, how sad. How sad, Doug.
Smack them up one side of the head with the Bible, the other side of the head with a copy of the Constitution. Seriously, we are in so much trouble, and that's. Look, I don't fly. Because oh yeah, don't get me started on the TSA.
I got you shook up now.
Don't get me started. Oh man. But by the way, that's one area I do believe, folks, that we can fight back. If everyone said, no, not me, not my wife, not my daughter, not here, not now, not ever, if we all did that or refused to fly, or if we just stuck together, I think we could push back. We could push back the TSA because we know they're weenies, and we know that we did make a difference. Alex Jones did made him stand down during that week in Thanksgiving 2 years ago. So, at any rate, that's another discussion for another day. But Doctor, I got to tell you, you've been just a wealth of information. I cannot believe. I got to get me some of that coconut oil and the other supplements. Your mental acuity, your energy level.
We're gonna get you his book, Dad.
I'll be happy to send you guys the book.
I'm gonna. You know what? You'll probably have to put me up at your house for about a week and a half, 2 weeks.
Yeah,
you're more than welcome to come to my house.
Yeah,
wow,
intensive inpatient reprogramming, food reprogramming seminar.
But folks, 10foods.com, that's tenfoods.com. You've got to visit that website to take a look at the, oh my goodness, no, you guys aren't that old. No.
Well, now picture, I'm 55. I'm 58 now, but we still look the same.
Oh, my word. Okay.
That's great.
Wow, fantastic. Well, Doctor, I want to thank you so very much for being part of our program tonight. You've inspired many. I've gotten so many emails. Do you have an email address, or do you not do that?
Well, we have one through the office. I mean, I can give one out. If I gave one out, though, to my personal email at the house,
no, that's okay.
I would be deceived. But when you go to the healthmasters.com website, it has contact us, and it has my email address there. That goes to the office, and anybody can email me and ask me any questions, and I'll do the best I can to answer them. And I do answer all those questions by myself. I do answer all the questions, by the way, so I'll be able to help them. And, of course, they can call the phone number, too, the 1-800-726-1834, and we can do that, too, for the folks that are listening. To do our best to try to help as many people as we can there. And we actually have live people that answer the telephone. They're not answered in India, okay? And you're not put, and we don't put you on hold. You're put on a loop. Maybe you hold for a couple of minutes, but you're going to get a live operator, and you don't have to worry about voicemail and leaving messages. I can't stand all that stuff.
Oh, man.
I'll be more than happy to send you guys some books out there too, so you can have those available, Joe and Doug, for your friends and stuff too. I'll get those out to you tomorrow.
Well, God bless you. Thank you so very much. And I'll tell you what, I'm an advocate. I mean, I'm a believer. Folks, please share this broadcast with your friends, your family, anyone you care about. Fantastic information. And
we're going to have the doctor back on here again, because this is a fantastic broadcast. Our live interactive chat is saying, put a regular spot in there for him.
Well, thank you.
Your appearance tonight is fantastic, and we're definitely going to have you back, because so much information you whizzed through in just 3 hours, and it went by so fast. And I know we could talk for a lot longer. and the energy level you exhibited. And, you know, we drink over here, if it's not coffee, and my dad's got Red Bull here and there, and the energy level is not as high as yours is, and you're saying you're drinking, you know,
well, no, I
had
green tea. I haven't had any coffee in probably 2 weeks, and I had green tea extract on those purple sticks, and we have those on our website too. They're called purple sticks, and we have those on the at healthmasters.com. And I had those this morning early, like 6-7 o'clock, and I haven't had any caffeine at all since then. I don't
Wow.
do that if I can't help it throughout the day.
Yeah,
and
my
like
cardiologist.
I'm 58.
Wow. Fantastic. Well, again, we really appreciate your time. Thank you so very much. Once again, folks, our very special guest, Dr. Ted Broer from 10foods.com. That's 10foods.com. And, of course, his book, Breakthrough Health. Fantastic. Doctor, thank you so very much. We do hope you come back again.
I'm looking forward to it, guys. Thank you for having me on.
All right. God bless.
You too.
Folks, that'll do it. We're up against the close of the show already. It's just amazing. By the way, folks, on Wednesday, just got notice, Steve Quayle and Greg Evenson on Wednesday. That's Steve Quayle and Greg Evenson on Wednesday. So
that'll be great. Greg Evenson was on right before Christmas, I think,
yes.
right around that time. And we haven't had him back since. And coming on with Steve, that'll be a fantastic show. So tomorrow we have Stan Dale in the second hour. We're going to cover news and take your calls in the first and third hours. And then Wednesday, Steve and Greg Evenson will be on, which will be a powerful spiritual show, I'm imagining, as they are always. And we're working last week when we could not broadcast, we had Greg Jackson scheduled to come on. And we're working out how to get him back because he has a busy schedule this week, but wants to come back, whether we do a pre-recorded interview or whether we do it live. We're going to be working on getting that set up as well.
Wednesday's the topic Wednesday, Flashpoints, America Under Siege. So that's going to be a fantastic program. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for being with us tonight, our extended family. I'm sorry we could not get all of the questions that you had asked, but my goodness, what a wealth of information. With that, God bless, good night, stay safe until tomorrow. Have a good night.